Welcome to Sleepy Stories. In this episode, we will take a clear and steady look at the world of intelligence, how nations gather information, protect secrets, and influence events without ever appearing on the surface. The goal of this story is to help you learn while you rest. If you do not fall asleep right away, that is completely fine. In the time you are awake, you'll explore the hidden infrastructure behind modern power and decision-making. Simply listen, let your breathing slow, and allow the information to settle at its own pace. Every day, thousands of pieces of information are quietly gathered, analyzed, and acted upon, not by journalists, scholars, or open institutions, but by intelligence services. These are the silent arms of statecraft. They operate in embassies and backrooms, in satellite stations and basement offices, in languages that are never spoken aloud. Their purpose is singular: to reduce uncertainty in a world full of risk. But what exactly is an intelligence service? It is not just a spy agency. It is a structured system for collecting, processing, and interpreting information to support national security and foreign policy. Most governments operate at least one such service, and many have several. Some focus on gathering information abroad, others monitor threats at home, some are military, others are civilian. Some operate under strict legal frameworks, while others move in shadows with little oversight. Intelligence is typically divided into several forms. Human intelligence, or HUMINT, involves gathering information from people, sources, defectors, or agents recruited in secret. Signals intelligence, or SIGINT, involves intercepting communications, radio transmissions, emails, phone calls. Imagery intelligence, or IMINT, uses satellites and aerial sensors to observe physical environments. Open source intelligence, or OSINT, analyzes publicly available information, from news reports to social media. Each type offers a different window into a situation. Together, they form a mosaic. What makes intelligence distinct from information is the analysis. Intelligence officers do not merely collect facts, they interpret meaning, anticipate behavior, and estimate consequences. This often involves understanding the intentions of hostile governments, terrorist groups, or emerging technologies. It means recognizing not only what has happened, but what is likely to happen next. Despite popular portrayals, intelligence services are rarely about dramatic missions or secret gadgets. Most of the work is methodical, analytical, and collaborative. It involves linguists, engineers, historians, and psychologists. It requires judgment under ambiguity, decision-making under time pressure, and constant ethical tension. Some operations involve deception and risk. Others revolve around quiet negotiations or decoding encrypted traffic. This story will take you through the evolution of intelligence, from ancient spies in the courts of emperors to modern cyber units scanning vast networks. You will learn how intelligence shaped wars, safeguarded peace, and sometimes overstepped legal and moral boundaries. From the disciplined corridors of MI6 to the sprawling reach of the CIA, from the secrecy of China's MSS to the precision of Mossad, we will explore the different philosophies and structures that define how nations think in secret. And throughout, you'll gain a clearer sense of how invisible systems help manage visible events, and how the balance between knowledge and secrecy has shaped the modern world. If you haven't yet fallen asleep, that is completely fine. You are still absorbing one of the most complex and fascinating aspects of global affairs. If you are ready, we now begin. Long before satellites tracked missile launches or analysts sifted digital traffic, intelligence was passed through whispers, signals, and shadows. The story of espionage begins not in high-tech war rooms, but in ancient palaces and distant battlefields. In every civilization that has ruled, traded, or fought, there have been people whose job it was to know what others did not want known. They were the eyes behind the curtain, the ears in the market square, the voices that shaped decisions from behind the throne. In ancient Egypt, the pharaohs relied on a complex bureaucracy to maintain control over distant provinces and internal rivals. Within that structure were informants tasked with reporting unrest, rumors, and subversion. While little survives in writing about Egyptian espionage, the presence of secret watchers is implied in the detailed administrative records and military campaigns that stretched across thousands of kilometers. Control, after all, required awareness, and awareness required information gathered discreetly. In India, espionage was not only practiced, but codified. The Arthashastra, written over 2,000 years ago and attributed to Chanakya, the advisor to Emperor Chandragupta Maurya, contains detailed guidance on spy networks. It describes how agents should be recruited, trained, and paid, how they should infiltrate enemy courts, and how misinformation could be used as a weapon. The system envisioned by the Arthashastra involved multiple layers of covert agents, each watching the other, a structure designed to ensure both loyalty and effectiveness. In China, similar ideas emerged in the classical military tradition. Sun Tzu's The Art of War, written during the Warring States period, includes a full chapter on the use of spies. He classifies them into 5 types: local spies, inward spies, converted spies, doomed spies, and surviving spies, each with a distinct role in acquiring or transmitting information. For Sun Tzu, knowledge was the supreme tool of warfare. Battles could be won without fighting if the enemy was understood well enough. The Greeks, particularly during their many intercity wars, made use of espionage to monitor troop movements and diplomatic shifts. The city-state of Athens employed paid informers known as sycophants, originally people who reported violations of trade regulations, but eventually extending to political reporting. During the Peloponnesian War, both Athens and Sparta relied on scouts and informers. Military messengers sometimes carried hidden messages, written on wooden tablets beneath layers of wax or concealed in hollow rods. The Persian Empire, with its vast territory stretching from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, established one of the first known intelligence courier systems. Called the King's Eyes and Ears, these royal inspectors travelled the empire with authority to observe, question, and report directly to the king. Their task was not only to assess loyalty but to detect signs of rebellion or mismanagement. In such a massive empire, the ability to project authority depended on knowing what was happening in every corner and acting on that knowledge before unrest could spread. Even in the ancient Hebrew tradition, the Old Testament includes references to intelligence gathering. The Book of Numbers describes how Moses sent 12 spies into the land of Canaan to assess its people and defenses. This story, like many others from antiquity, blends religious narrative with practical geopolitics. Leaders needed information to make strategic decisions, and that information often came from unseen or unacknowledged sources. What binds these ancient systems together is the recognition that information is power. Rulers who knew more than their enemies, or even their allies, could outmaneuver threats, forge stronger alliances, and suppress dissent before it erupted. Espionage was not a sideshow to politics. It was an integral part of it. These early methods might seem primitive compared to modern satellite surveillance or quantum encryption, but their logic was identical. The one who knows first has the advantage. Espionage in the ancient world was rarely discussed openly. It thrived in ambiguity, between loyalty and treason, between myth and memory. Many spies were never recorded by name. Others became legends, exaggerated or obscured by the stories told after their time. What remains clear is that even in the earliest civilizations, secrecy was both a necessity and an art. Long before the word intelligence came to mean what it does today, people understood that what is hidden often determines what becomes known. The Roman Empire was a civilization built on structure, law, and communication, and at its heart was the constant need to know. To rule such a vast and diverse territory, the emperors of Rome developed a subtle yet effective intelligence network. Though the Romans did not formalize a secret service in the way we think of today, they did rely heavily on information flows to detect unrest, manage governors, and anticipate threats, both foreign and domestic. One of the earliest known Roman intelligence structures was the frumentarii. Originally, these were officials responsible for managing grain supplies, hence their name, derived from frumentum, meaning grain. Over time, however, their role shifted. As they traveled across provinces and interacted with military units, tax offices, and local populations, they began to serve as informal messengers and observers. Eventually, emperors came to rely on them as couriers, informants, and surveillance officers. By the 2nd century, the frumentarii had effectively become the eyes and ears of imperial authority. Stationed in military headquarters, especially in Rome's central military complex on the Caelian Hill, the frumentarii collected information from across the empire. They reported not only on foreign affairs but also on the conduct of provincial officials, the mood of local populations, and any potential signs of rebellion. While officially under the command of the praetorian prefect, in practice they answered to the emperor. Their presence was both administrative and psychological, a reminder that imperial Rome was watching. In time, a second group emerged, the speculatores. These men served as scouts, messengers, and occasionally bodyguards for military commanders and emperors. Their role was more active than the frumentarii, involving battlefield reconnaissance and high-risk communication delivery. While not strictly spies, their mobility and access to strategic information made them a critical part of Rome's intelligence capacity. The Roman approach to intelligence was embedded in its administrative genius. Roads, inns, and postal systems, such as the cursus publicus or imperial courier system, allowed information to move rapidly across great distances. Messages were coded in simple ciphers or disguised through indirect language. Couriers used wax tablets, which could be scraped clean and reused, and messages were sometimes hidden beneath layers of wax to avoid detection. Foreign intelligence was also part of Rome's concern. During military campaigns, commanders sent scouts and interpreters ahead of the legions to learn the terrain, assess enemy strength, and gather political insight. Julius Caesar, in his Commentarii de Bello Gallico, often described how he used local tribes and informants to anticipate Gallic strategies. Knowledge of the enemy's intentions and alliances was essential to Rome's expansionist success. Domestically, the intelligence apparatus was most developed under emperors who felt insecure or vulnerable. Emperors like Domitian, Septimius Severus, and Diocletian expanded the use of informers, creating a climate of suspicion within the capital. Accusations of conspiracy, treason, or sedition often relied on the word of anonymous sources. While this system allowed emperors to suppress plots and rivals, it also bred fear, false accusations, and abuses of power. By the 3rd century, the widespread fear of imperial spies became a feature of Roman political life. The frumentarii, once logistical staff, had become so feared that emperors were eventually pressured to disband them. They were replaced by the agentes in rebus, agents in matters, who served under the magister officiorum, the master of offices, in the late imperial bureaucracy. These agents were more formalized and less military, resembling early civil intelligence officers. Roman intelligence was less about espionage in foreign capitals and more about maintaining control over an empire of varied languages, loyalties, and cultures. Its emphasis was internal, watching governors, monitoring religious movements, keeping tabs on the military, and ensuring that power remained centralized in Rome. Though crude by modern standards, the Roman system laid foundations that would be echoed centuries later. It revealed how surveillance and information could extend the life of an empire, not by brute force alone, but by knowing who might threaten it before they ever acted. In this way, the Roman Empire's intelligence culture became an early model of how to govern not only land, but behavior. As the Roman Empire fell and Europe entered the Middle Ages, the structures of centralized intelligence gave way to a more fragmented world, yet the need for information never disappeared. Kings, popes, merchants, and military leaders all sought ways to stay ahead of rivals in a landscape shaped by feudal loyalties, religious authority, and shifting borders. Though less institutionalized than in the classical world, espionage became a tool of survival and influence, practiced quietly by emissaries, monks, and spies embedded in courts and churches. In early medieval Europe, intelligence gathering was often tied to diplomacy. Kings sent trusted advisors and clerics to foreign courts, not just to negotiate alliances, but to observe, report, and sometimes manipulate. These individuals carried no official title as spies, but their roles blurred lines between diplomacy and espionage. Monasteries also played a subtle role in intelligence. Located along trade routes and pilgrimage paths, they served as centers of information flow. Monks copied letters, tracked travelers, and sometimes passed on rumors or political news to their patrons. The Catholic Church, with its far-reaching influence, became a powerful force in medieval intelligence. The papal curia maintained detailed records on clergy, monarchs, and heretical movements. Church emissaries collected more than spiritual information. They reported on the mood of the people, the stability of rulers, and threats to ecclesiastical authority. Papal legates often functioned as political observers, advising the Pope on whether to endorse kings or excommunicate them. The Inquisition, founded in the 13th century, built a systematic process for extracting confessions and identifying underground networks. While focused on religious orthodoxy, its methods mirrored intelligence work: surveillance, interrogation, and documentation. Islamic states in the medieval period also developed sophisticated intelligence practices. The Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad maintained a class of officials known as Barid, postal and intelligence officers, responsible for monitoring provincial governors and military commanders. These agents filed regular reports to the Caliph, who relied on their observations to detect rebellion, corruption, or dissent. Their work allowed the Caliph to maintain authority across a vast and diverse empire. The Crusades brought Christian and Muslim powers into sustained contact and conflict, and intelligence became central to both sides. Crusader armies often employed scouts and informants to guide their movements and assess enemy strength. Muslim leaders, including Saladin, relied on networks of tribal allies and merchants to gather real-time battlefield intelligence. Languages, customs, and religious affiliations made these tasks complex, requiring interpreters and cultural intermediaries who could navigate unfamiliar terrain while staying discreet. In medieval Japan, a unique form of intelligence culture evolved. The shinobi, later romanticized as ninja, were specialists in infiltration, surveillance, and irregular warfare. Far from the silent assassins of popular fiction, many shinobi were low-ranking samurai or peasants trained in disguise, escape, and subterfuge. Their skills were valued by rival warlords during the Sengoku period, a time of near-constant civil war, where battles were won not just by force but by deception and psychological disruption. Throughout the Middle Ages, political marriages were another avenue for information. Princesses sent to marry foreign kings often became unofficial observers for their home courts. Their letters, encoded in simple ciphers or concealed in gifts, relayed information about court politics, military preparations, or shifting alliances. Women, while rarely acknowledged in official records, frequently played intelligence roles through their positions in royal households or religious orders. One of the most influential spy masters of the era was Frederick II of the Holy Roman Empire. Fluent in multiple languages and deeply skeptical of both the papacy and his own barons, Frederick maintained a core of informants and advisors spread across Europe and the Mediterranean. He received intelligence reports in multiple scripts and dialects, using them to manage delicate negotiations and military campaigns. His court at Palermo became a crossroads of Christian, Muslim, and Jewish scholars, and a hub of coded knowledge exchange. By the late Middle Ages, espionage had become a recognized tool of statecraft, even if it remained cloaked in euphemism. There were no intelligence agencies as such, but there were systems, methods, and people dedicated to the quiet pursuit of advantage. Whether traveling under diplomatic cover, hiding in monastic robes, or whispering behind palace doors, the medieval spy operated in a world where information meant power and secrecy often meant survival. The early modern era, spanning roughly from the 15th to the 18th century, marked a profound shift in how intelligence was gathered and used. As kingdoms grew into centralized states and empires stretched across oceans, the demands of diplomacy, warfare, and commerce gave rise to more formalized systems of espionage. This was a time when secrecy became strategy, and the idea of a dedicated spy master began to take recognizable shape. In England, the reign of Queen Elizabeth I stands out as a turning point in the professionalization of intelligence. Her principal secretary, Sir Francis Walsingham, is widely regarded as one of history's first true intelligence chiefs. Fluent in multiple languages and fiercely loyal to the crown, Walsingham created a vast network of informants and agents spread across Europe. His operatives intercepted letters, monitored ports, and infiltrated Catholic conspiracies. One of his most significant achievements was uncovering the Babington Plot, a plan to assassinate Elizabeth and replace her with the Catholic Mary, Queen of Scots. Through a combination of surveillance, forged correspondence, and controlled leaks, Walsingham not only exposed the plot but used it to justify Mary's execution. It was an early demonstration of intelligence used not just for defense, but for shaping political outcomes. Meanwhile, in the Italian city-states of Venice and Florence, intelligence practices developed within the machinery of trade and diplomacy. The Venetian Council of Ten oversaw a complex system of surveillance, including the use of bocce di leone, lion's mouth mailboxes, where citizens could anonymously report subversive activity. While these reports were often used to settle personal scores, they also created a form of crowdsourced intelligence. Venice maintained a standing core of diplomatic agents who traveled across Europe, gathering information and reporting back through encrypted letters. The balance between commerce and secrecy made Venetian intelligence highly pragmatic and surprisingly modern in its outlook. France, under Cardinal Richelieu and later Cardinal Mazarin, also embraced the power of information. Richelieu, as chief minister to Louis XIII, developed a centralized state intelligence apparatus focused on both internal dissent and foreign threats. He believed that stability could only be achieved through foresight, and that foresight came from listening to intercepted messages, to whispers in salons, and to coded letters moving across borders. Richelieu's agents tracked the activities of nobles, clergy, and ambassadors, building a picture of the realm that extended far beyond what was publicly visible. The Protestant Reformation and Catholic Counter-Reformation further intensified the need for intelligence. Religious allegiance became a political fault line, and Europe was filled with spies working on behalf of both the Vatican and Protestant states. The Jesuit order, while primarily focused on education and missionary work, also functioned as a global network of information collectors. Their letters from Asia, the Americas, and across Europe often contained not only theological reflections, but observations on trade routes, local politics, and military readiness. In this period, encryption and code breaking began to evolve rapidly. The invention of the printing press had enabled faster communication, but it also created the need for more secure channels. Ciphers became increasingly complex, often involving rotating alphabets or letter substitution schemes. Cryptographers and code breakers became essential figures in royal courts, and the race between secret writing and its decipherment became a quiet arms race all its own. Notably, this was also the age when public opinion began to matter. Monarchs and ministers recognized that controlling information meant more than knowing secrets, it meant shaping narratives. Propaganda became a tool of governance, with pamphlets, broadsheets, and proclamations used to steer perception. Intelligence operatives not only observed events but manipulated how they were interpreted, often leaking edited documents or orchestrating scandals to discredit rivals. Espionage became part of the machinery of state. While still lacking the formal bureaucracies of modern intelligence agencies, early modern powers built enduring habits, intercepting messages, paying informants, training agents, and maintaining plausible deniability. Secrecy became a recognized domain of statecraft, no longer just the concern of monarchs and generals, but of professional administrators who understood that power was as much about what could be hidden as what could be shown. The Napoleonic era was not just a revolution in military tactics, it was a turning point in the evolution of state surveillance and information management. As Napoleon Bonaparte rose from a military officer to Emperor of France, he brought with him a deep appreciation for intelligence. He understood that to dominate Europe, he would need more than armies and artillery, he would need insight. His approach transformed espionage into a more structured, state-controlled tool, integrated with politics, policing, and military operations. Central to Napoleon's intelligence network was Joseph Fouché, his formidable Minister of Police. A former Jacobin-turned-pragmatic administrator, Fouché built an internal surveillance state that rivaled any in Europe at the time. Under his leadership, the Ministry of Police became a clearinghouse for domestic intelligence. It monitored mail, tapped conversations, deployed informants, and maintained detailed records on political dissidents, foreign visitors, and even members of Napoleon's own family. Fouché was known for anticipating threats before they could materialize, not because of prophecy, but because of a meticulous information ecosystem. Fouché's agents worked in every major city across the empire. They posed as merchants, laborers, and teachers. They filed reports filled with coded references and behavioral cues. Their observations fed directly into centralized dossiers, enabling the regime to make preemptive arrests, suppress publications, and manipulate alliances. While the methods were authoritarian, they were also systematic, reflecting a philosophy that information control was governance. At the same time, Napoleon invested in foreign intelligence. French embassies doubled as listening posts. Ambassadors cultivated relationships with exiles, opposition leaders, and merchants to gather information on troop movements, economic shifts, and public sentiment in foreign capitals. Napoleon's spies gathered details on Prussian mobilization, Austrian treaties, and British naval construction, often before those governments made their actions public. One of Napoleon's key military advantages was the use of rapid and secure communication. He implemented a system of couriers and signal stations to transmit orders across the empire at unprecedented speed. Combined with his intelligence reports, this allowed him to adapt to battlefield conditions faster than his adversaries. His famous campaigns, from Austerlitz to Jena, were not just won with speed and firepower, but with awareness. British intelligence, meanwhile, evolved in direct response to the Napoleonic threat. The British Foreign Office developed more structured intelligence-gathering operations particularly concerning France and its satellite states. Networks of spies operated in France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, often using encrypted letters and invisible ink. British code breakers, especially at the Admiralty, worked to intercept and decipher French military communications. The pressure of war accelerated the professionalization of these systems on both sides. The Napoleonic Wars also introduced psychological operations and deception into military strategy. False orders were allowed to fall into enemy hands. Fake troop movements were staged to mislead scouts. Napoleon himself was a master of narrative control, publishing bulletins from the battlefield that exaggerated victories or minimized losses, shaping the morale of both his troops and the public back home. Espionage reached the battlefield in other forms as well. Scouts and informants were deployed ahead of marching columns to assess terrain, gather civilian sentiment, and identify supply routes. Military intelligence officers compiled maps, translated documents, and interrogated prisoners, all with the goal of giving commanders an informational edge. By the end of the Napoleonic era, intelligence had become inseparable from military doctrine. The wars had demonstrated that armies needed more than logistics and discipline, they needed foresight. Surveillance, secrecy, and deception were no longer secondary tactics. They were integrated into every phase of planning and execution. What began as the shadowy realm of diplomats and secret police had become a formal dimension of statecraft and warfare. Though Napoleon ultimately fell, the systems he and his adversaries developed endured. The lessons of the era would influence how modern states approached intelligence as a fusion of administration, policing, diplomacy, and strategy. It was no longer enough to fight well. One had to think, listen, and act with knowledge the opponent lacked. World War I ushered in a new age of intelligence, shaped by industrial warfare, global alliances, and rapid technological change. No longer the domain of courtiers or personal informants, espionage became a professionalized, large-scale endeavor. For the first time, nations mobilized intelligence agencies as part of their formal war infrastructure. In the mud of the trenches and the wires of intercepted messages, intelligence work became critical to strategic survival. The British established Room 40, a secret unit within the Admiralty devoted to signals intelligence. Located in a quiet corner of London, this small team of codebreakers and linguists intercepted and decrypted German naval communications. Their most significant success was the decryption of the Zimmermann telegram in 1917, a secret message from Germany to Mexico proposing a military alliance against the United States. When made public, the telegram helped push the US into the war. It was a landmark moment. A single intercepted message altered the course of global conflict. Germany, in turn, developed the Abteilung, a military intelligence unit that monitored enemy communications and conducted covert operations. German agents operated across Europe and even in the United States, where they were involved in efforts to sabotage arms shipments and influence public opinion. Their work often relied on intermediaries, shipping agents, businessmen, and émigrés who could blend into civilian life while collecting sensitive information. France relied on its Deuxième Bureau, which had been gathering foreign intelligence since the 19th century. During the war, it focused on counter-espionage, tracking German operatives and monitoring troop morale. French intelligence also coordinated with Belgium, whose underground networks provided valuable information about German troop movements and logistics in occupied territories. Civilians, including teachers, priests, and railway workers, became essential to these efforts, often risking their lives to report on enemy activity. In Russia, the Okhrana had laid the groundwork for imperial surveillance, but the upheaval of war and revolution fragmented the country's intelligence capacity. Bolshevik leaders, upon seizing power, would later build their own system, but during the war, Russia's intelligence efforts were inconsistent and often compromised by internal instability. One of the most striking features of WWI espionage was the use of women in intelligence roles. While some, like the Dutch dancer Mata Hari, became famous, often for reasons more symbolic than operational, countless others worked in roles that were vital and unheralded. Women served as couriers, radio operators, and liaisons between partisan groups and allied forces. In occupied Belgium and northern France, women used their social invisibility as cover, passing coded messages sewn into clothing or hidden inside baked goods. Technology reshaped the intelligence landscape. Telegraph lines carried strategic messages across continents, and armies increasingly relied on radio communication, a medium that could be intercepted by enemy listeners. Field stations began to track signal strength and triangulate the location of enemy transmitters. Aerial reconnaissance, using balloons and later fixed-wing aircraft, enabled the first systematic mapping of battlefield positions from the sky. These methods allowed for the rapid detection of troop concentrations, artillery placements, and supply depots. Human intelligence remained essential. Spies were inserted behind enemy lines to observe troop movements and sow disinformation. Sabotage units destroyed railways, ammunition dumps, and telegraph wires. Intelligence officers interrogated prisoners of war, analyzed enemy propaganda, and studied captured equipment. Entire divisions of the military were dedicated to gathering, interpreting, and acting on information. The war also introduced the concept of total intelligence coordination. Information was no longer isolated by department or geography. It flowed between allies, between military and civilian authorities, and between intelligence services and political leadership. Coordination between British, French, and eventually American services laid the groundwork for future alliances in intelligence sharing. As the Great War drew on, intelligence failures and successes increasingly shaped its outcomes. Misinformation led to disastrous offensives. Accurate reconnaissance enabled surprise victories. The vast scale of the war meant that intelligence had to be both strategic and tactical, long-range and immediate, centralized and field-driven. This dual requirement pushed services to evolve quickly. By the war's end, intelligence had become institutionalized. Lessons learned in decoding, surveillance, and coordination would shape the next generation of services. World War I had shown that information, properly gathered, analyzed, and acted upon, could be as decisive as any weapon. The aftermath of World War I left behind a changed world, shattered empires, fragile peace, and a new understanding of how deeply information could shape military and political outcomes. Intelligence was no longer viewed as an auxiliary tool, but as a central pillar of national security. In the interwar period, the foundations were laid for modern intelligence agencies, permanent institutions with defined missions, trained personnel, and bureaucratic authority. What had once been scattered, informal, or improvised began to crystallize into enduring structures. In the United Kingdom, the wartime activities of Room 40 and the Secret Service Bureau evolved into formal organizations. The Secret Intelligence Service, SIS, known colloquially as MI6, was tasked with gathering foreign intelligence, while MI5 took on domestic counterintelligence. Though their existence remained secret for decades, these agencies developed internal hierarchies, recruitment pipelines, and specialized units for code-breaking, surveillance, and agent handling. Their mission was no longer ad hoc, it was institutionalized and continuous. In the United States, intelligence remained fragmented. The Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, and the Military Intelligence Division, MID, were the primary players, each attached to their respective military branches. These organizations collected intelligence on foreign navies and land forces, but lacked coordination or central leadership. There was no civilian foreign intelligence agency, no equivalent to Britain's MI6. That would not change until World War II. Yet the groundwork was being laid through growing networks of attachés, embassy staff, and liaison officers. Germany, constrained by the Treaty of Versailles, reorganized its intelligence apparatus in secret. The Abwehr became the official military intelligence organization of the Weimar Republic, operating under the Ministry of Defense. Its focus ranged from counter-espionage to foreign military analysis. As political tensions grew in the 1930 seconds, the Abwehr would become embroiled in competition with Nazi intelligence units like the Sicherheitsdienst SD, reflecting the fragmentation and politicization of German power structures. France's Deuxième Bureau continued to develop its capabilities, focusing on border surveillance, foreign intelligence, and cryptography. French intelligence analysts studied German rearmament and monitored political unrest in colonies and neighboring states. Though respected for its technical competence, the Deuxième Bureau faced challenges from internal politics and a lack of coordination with other branches of government. Soviet Russia, under Lenin and later Stalin, created one of the most extensive and brutal intelligence systems of the 20th century. The Cheka, established during the Russian Civil War, evolved into the GPU, OGPU, and eventually the NKVD. These organizations combined external espionage, internal surveillance, and political repression. Agents infiltrated émigré communities abroad and neutralized perceived enemies of the revolution. The Soviet model fused ideology and intelligence into a single mission: the defense of the state and the consolidation of power through any means necessary. New technologies also changed how intelligence was collected and analyzed. Radio interception became more sophisticated. Governments invested in cryptography and counter-cryptography, hiring mathematicians and linguists to build cipher departments. Signals intelligence became a formal discipline, no longer limited to military use. Civilian ministries began receiving encrypted dispatches and forming secret archives. Information now had layers: collection, encryption, transmission, decryption, and interpretation, all of which required dedicated personnel. The role of intelligence in peacetime was redefined. It was no longer simply about preparing for war. It became about economic forecasts, political risk, ideological threats, and border stability. Agencies monitored labor movements, tracked the rise of fascist and communist parties, and observed foreign scientific developments. Diplomats, journalists, and businessmen were increasingly seen as valuable sources or targets of information. Across the globe, a common pattern emerged: the transition from informal networks to formal agencies. Intelligence became bureaucratized. Officers wore suits instead of uniforms. Files replaced rumors. Reports were typed, coded, filed, and reviewed. Intelligence moved from personal trust to institutional procedure. This professionalization introduced both strength and rigidity. By the end of the interwar period, most major powers had some version of a permanent intelligence service. The lines between military, diplomatic, and political intelligence were still blurry, and rivalries between agencies were common. But the core idea had taken root. Information was not an occasional advantage, it was a permanent requirement. The world was entering an age where every action would be watched, every decision informed, and every secret preserved or pursued with method and purpose. World War II transformed intelligence from a supporting function into a strategic force. The scale and speed of the global conflict demanded unprecedented coordination, innovation, and risk. Intelligence operations were integrated into every level of warfare, from high command decisions to local resistance movements. The war was fought with tanks and aircraft, but also with codes, deception, sabotage, and invisible alliances. Modern spycraft, as we understand it today, was forged in this crucible. In Britain, Bletchley Park became the center of Allied signals intelligence. This code-breaking facility employed mathematicians, linguists, and puzzle experts, many of them civilians, who worked around the clock to decrypt German communications. Their most famous success was breaking the Enigma cipher used by the German military to coordinate operations. Led by figures such as Alan Turing, the team developed early computational machines, precursors to modern computers, to automate parts of the decryption process. Intelligence from these efforts, known as Ultra, was so valuable that it was tightly restricted, even from many military commanders. It shaped the outcome of naval battles, protected convoys, and revealed German troop movements. The United States, entering the war later, established the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, in 1942. The OSS was the first centralized American intelligence agency, combining analysis, espionage, sabotage, and support for resistance groups. It recruited operatives from universities, the military, and even Hollywood, training them in espionage techniques at secret camps. These agents parachuted into occupied Europe and Asia, gathered intelligence, disrupted enemy infrastructure, and coordinated local insurgents. After the war, much of the OSS's personnel and methodology would be absorbed into the newly formed CIA. In the Soviet Union, intelligence was managed by the NKVD, which oversaw both domestic repression and foreign espionage. Soviet agents infiltrated German command structures, spied on allies, and passed critical information about the Manhattan Project back to Moscow. Their most effective tactic was the recruitment of ideological sympathizers, individuals who supported communism and were willing to share state secrets. These illegals, often trained in false identities and deep cover techniques, became a model for post-war espionage tradecraft. Germany's intelligence system, though vast, suffered from internal divisions. The Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence agency, operated independently of the SS and the Gestapo, creating competition and inefficiency. Despite notable successes, such as infiltrating resistance networks and running spies in North Africa and the Soviet Union, German intelligence was repeatedly misled by Allied deception operations. British double agents, most famously Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, fed false information to the Germans for years, earning their trust and misdirecting critical operations, including those related to the Normandy invasion. Deception became one of the Allies' most powerful tools. Operation Fortitude convinced the Germans that the D-Day landings would occur at Calais, not Normandy. Inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, and a fictitious army group under General Patton were all used to support this illusion. The success of the deception meant that German reinforcements were delayed, contributing directly to the success of the beach landings. Espionage extended beyond the battlefield. The French resistance, supported by the British Special Operations Executive (SOE) and the American OSS, gathered intelligence, sabotaged trains, cut telephone lines, and helped downed pilots escape. In the Pacific, Allied codebreakers deciphered Japanese naval communications, leading to the decisive Battle of Midway. Japanese-American linguists, trained at top-secret schools, played a critical role in this effort. World War II also marked the rise of psychological operations. Leaflets, broadcasts, and rumors were deployed to lower enemy morale and encourage defection. Intelligence services studied behavior, culture, and even superstition to craft messages that would resonate with specific audiences. This approach foreshadowed modern influence campaigns. The war created new norms. Intelligence services learned to share information across national boundaries, giving rise to alliances that would persist in the post-war world. It also introduced ethical dilemmas. Agents worked with criminal networks, Sabotage caused civilian casualties, and prisoners were sometimes tortured for information. These practices would later be scrutinized, but during the war, victory often overshadowed moral debate. By 1945, intelligence was no longer a backroom activity. It had become a pillar of strategic planning, essential to both offensive and defensive operations. Its success depended not only on secrecy, but on imagination, cooperation, and the ability to see the world as a shifting puzzle. In that puzzle, a well-placed piece of information could change the course of a continent. When World War II ended, a new kind of war began, one defined not by open battles, but by ideology, secrecy, and the ever-present threat of nuclear conflict. The Cold War turned intelligence into a global game of shadows. The United States and the Soviet Union built enormous bureaucracies dedicated to watching, influencing, and undermining each other. The entire world became a field of operation, and intelligence agencies evolved into some of the most powerful institutions of the age. In the United States, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, was founded in 1947 through the National Security Act. Unlike its wartime predecessor, the OSS, the CIA was designed to operate continuously, gathering foreign intelligence and conducting covert operations. It quickly expanded its reach, funding media outlets, staging coups, recruiting informants, and running paramilitary programs. From Latin America to Southeast Asia, the CIA worked to contain communist influence, often supporting authoritarian regimes that aligned with American strategic goals. The Soviet Union responded with the KGB, formed from earlier security agencies. It served both as a foreign intelligence service and as an internal security force. The KGB placed deep cover agents in Western governments, research institutions, and corporations. Soviet spies passed along blueprints for nuclear weapons, stole radar and aviation designs, and influenced political movements abroad. The ideology of Marxism-Leninism provided both a justification and a recruitment tool. Many spies believed they were serving a global cause, not just a country. Berlin, divided between East and West, became the symbolic and operational center of Cold War espionage. Both sides dug tunnels under the city, planted microphones in embassies, and used parks, train stations, and cafes for clandestine meetings. Dead drops, invisible ink, microdots, and hollow coins were standard tools of the trade. The city's proximity to both NATO and Warsaw Pact forces made it a volatile arena for intelligence maneuvering. Elsewhere, smaller intelligence services adapted to the bipolar world. East Germany's Stasi became notorious for its obsession with control. It recruited a vast network of informants. Estimates suggest 1 in 6 East Germans worked with or informed the Stasi in some capacity. Files were meticulously kept, phone lines tapped, and personal relationships dissected. The goal was not just to detect dissent, but to prevent it through psychological pressure and social fragmentation. In the West, intelligence became entangled with domestic politics. The FBI under J. Edgar Hoover surveilled civil rights leaders, suspected communists, and anti-war activists. In many democracies, the tension between security and civil liberties became a central debate. Intelligence agencies wielded enormous influence, but often operated with little oversight. The Cold War also pushed the boundaries of technology. Satellites were launched to photograph military installations from space. Electronic listening posts were built around the globe to intercept communications. The NSA emerged as a central player in signals intelligence, scanning the airwaves for encrypted messages. Meanwhile, voice-print identification, facial recognition, and early computers began reshaping how information was processed. Covert operations escalated. The CIA supported anti-communist fighters in Afghanistan, trained insurgents in Latin America, and ran psychological warfare campaigns. The KGB backed revolutionary groups funded disinformation efforts, and used economic leverage to influence governments. Assassination plots were discussed, sometimes attempted. Intelligence became not just reactive, but offensive. It was used to shape the world, not merely observe it. Throughout this period, intelligence services also turned inward, searching for traitors. The fear of moles led to intense internal investigations. The unmasking of double agents such as Aldrich Ames, Robert Hansen, and Kim Philby revealed how deeply compromised agencies could become. The betrayal cut both ways. Agents lived in constant uncertainty, unsure who might be passing information to the other side. Despite the tension, there were moments of cooperation. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, intelligence assessments played a critical role in avoiding nuclear war. Communications between rival services were sometimes used to signal intentions or de-escalate threats. Yet most of the Cold War was characterized by mistrust, proxy conflicts, and a relentless pursuit of advantage. By the late 1982, as the Cold War drew to a close, intelligence agencies faced a new question: what comes after the enemy disappears? But during those 4 decades of frozen conflict, intelligence was not just a means of protection. It was a defining feature of international relations. It shaped the balance of power, the conduct of war, and the lives of millions who never knew they were being watched. Among the many intelligence agencies that emerged in the aftermath of World War II, Israel's Mossad stands out for its boldness, adaptability, and global reach. Officially established in 1949, just a year after the founding of the State of Israel, Mossad quickly grew into one of the world's most effective and controversial intelligence services. Its missions span continents. Its operations have shifted the trajectory of conflicts, and its reputation for daring has shaped global perceptions of Israeli security doctrine. Mossad's formation was driven by necessity, surrounded by hostile neighbors, and shaped by the trauma of the Holocaust. Israel faced existential threats from the outset. Intelligence was not a luxury, it was survival. In its early years, Mossad focused on building human networks in Arab countries, tracking the movements of neighboring armies, and intercepting plans for attacks. Its operatives worked under diplomatic cover or used false identities, often posing as businessmen, journalists, or members of the Jewish diaspora. The agency gained international attention in 1960 with the capture of Adolf Eichmann, a key architect of the Holocaust. Mossad agents located him in Argentina, living under a false name, and brought him to Israel in a covert operation that avoided detection by both Argentine authorities and Nazi sympathizers. Eichmann's subsequent trial in Jerusalem was not just a legal proceeding, it was a message. For Mossad, intelligence work was not only about national defense, it was also about historical justice. In the decades that followed, Mossad conducted a series of high-risk operations, many of which involved extraterritorial assassinations or kidnappings. After the 1972 Munich Olympics, in which 11 Israeli athletes were killed by Palestinian militants, Mossad launched Operation Wrath of God, a campaign to track down and eliminate those responsible. The operation lasted years and spanned multiple countries, including Lebanon, France, and Italy. Though controversial, it reinforced Mossad's image as a force that would go to great lengths to defend Israeli citizens. Mossad's methods are characterized by long-term planning, deep cover, and a focus on human intelligence. While it has access to technical resources, much of its success comes from cultivating assets, recruiting informants, and embedding agents in hostile environments for extended periods. The agency is known for its psychological profiling and its ability to develop trust with individuals who might otherwise have no incentive to cooperate. Unlike many other intelligence services, Mossad operates under relatively limited public oversight. Its budget is classified, its leadership shifts are not always publicly announced, and its missions are rarely acknowledged. This opacity allows operational flexibility but raises questions about accountability, especially when actions result in diplomatic fallout or unintended casualties. One of Mossad's most celebrated operations occurred in 1976 during the hijacking of an Air France flight to Entebbe, Uganda. Although the rescue was carried out by Israeli special forces, the planning relied heavily on Mossad intelligence, including information about the airport layout, the location of hostages, and the identities of the hijackers. The mission became a model for counter-terrorism planning worldwide. In more recent decades, Mossad has focused on Iran's nuclear program, often working in the shadows to delay or disrupt development. Cyber operations, sabotage campaigns, and targeted assassinations of scientists have been attributed to the agency, though Israel rarely confirms or denies involvement. The theft of an entire Iranian nuclear archive in 2018, smuggled out of Tehran and presented publicly by the Israeli Prime Minister, showcased Mossad's continued capabilities and ambition. Mossad also plays a role in diplomacy. Through back-channel negotiations, the agency has helped establish unofficial communications between Israel and states with which it had no formal relations. These quiet engagements have sometimes paved the way for broader agreements, revealing the agency's dual role as both collector of secrets and creator of opportunity. As Israel's security landscape evolves, Mossad faces new challenges, from cyber threats and transnational terrorism to geopolitical realignments in the Middle East. Yet, its ethos remains rooted in a foundational principle: to ensure that danger is identified and disrupted before it reaches Israeli soil. What makes Mossad unique is not just its reach, but its mindset, one shaped by urgency, ingenuity, and a willingness to operate where conventional diplomacy cannot. In the world of secret services, few agencies have achieved such a profound global presence with such limited size and resources. Behind every intelligence operation, whether an intercepted message, a planted device, or a carefully cultivated asset, lies a deep reliance on psychology. Spycraft is not merely about tools and techniques. It is about understanding how people think, decide, deceive, and respond under pressure. The success of many intelligence missions depends less on technology and more on human behavior, how to influence it, read it, and sometimes break it. At the heart of human intelligence, lies recruitment. Intelligence officers look for vulnerabilities, financial stress, ideological dissatisfaction, personal grievance, or even loneliness. They assess personality traits, moral flexibility, and decision-making patterns. The recruitment process often unfolds slowly, sometimes over months or years. It begins with establishing trust, a seemingly benign friendship, a mentorship, or a shared professional interest. Then comes the test, an offer of money, protection, or purpose. A person who agrees to pass along a small, harmless piece of information often finds themselves pulled into deeper commitments. This psychological process is called development. It relies on subtle manipulation, not coercion. The goal is to make the recruited asset feel that they are making choices freely, even when they are being guided. The handler uses empathy, flattery, and tailored language to build rapport. A good handler remembers birthdays, adapts to mood shifts, and knows when to apply pressure or back off. In this relationship, information flows in exchange for affirmation, validation, or perceived safety. Deception is another psychological pillar of spycraft. Agents must lie convincingly, not just to enemies, but often to allies and civilians around them. Maintaining a cover identity requires more than memorizing a false biography. It involves embodying that identity so completely that it can withstand unexpected scrutiny. This includes nonverbal behavior, eye contact, posture, speech rhythm, and emotional response. Even small inconsistencies, an accent that slips, a misplaced reference, a reaction that feels out of sync, can trigger suspicion. Training in deception includes learning to suppress stress indicators. Operatives are taught to manage their heart rate, control facial microexpressions, and maintain composure in unpredictable situations. In high-risk operations, psychological resilience is often more important than physical strength. The pressure of living a lie, day after day, can erode even the most disciplined mind. Intelligence agencies regularly assess their operatives for signs of burnout, paranoia, or moral conflict. Interrogation, too, is steeped in psychological theory. Contrary to Hollywood depictions, most intelligence professionals avoid aggressive tactics. Skilled interrogators use silence, framing, and carefully worded questions to guide the subject towards self-disclosure. They observe not only what is said, but how it is said, the tone, hesitation, and timing. They build narratives that appear reasonable to the subject, gradually steering them toward confession or cooperation. Resistance is rarely broken. It is redirected. Social engineering, manipulating individuals into revealing information or performing actions, relies heavily on human psychology. Pretexting, for example, involves creating a believable but false reason for requesting information. Someone posing as an IT technician might call a target and ask for login credentials under the guise of fixing a system error. Success depends on the target's assumptions, cognitive shortcuts, and desire to be helpful or compliant in a professional setting. Psychological profiling is used not only for recruitment or targeting, but also for prediction. Analysts study leaders' speeches, writing, and body language to forecast behavior. During the Cold War, US psychologists attempted to profile Soviet leaders from a distance, looking for signs of aggression, caution, or insecurity. These profiles informed diplomatic strategy, military posture, and even nuclear readiness decisions. In more recent years, psychology has merged with data science. Intelligence services now analyze massive data sets to identify behavioral patterns that could indicate radicalization, espionage, or emerging threats. Algorithms flag anomalies, changes in spending habits, travel, or online interactions that may warrant human investigation. Still, the interpretation of those patterns requires a nuanced understanding of human motivation. The tools may be digital, but the target remains psychological. Even in the most high-tech environments, the human element persists. A spy may carry advanced devices and use encrypted systems, but their greatest asset is often their ability to read the room, mirror emotion, and make others feel understood or vulnerable. Spycraft, at its core, is about gaining trust without revealing intent. In the end, intelligence work is shaped not just by what people do, but why they do it. The invisible battlefield of the mind remains one of the most critical and complex domains in global security. The Secret Intelligence Service of the United Kingdom, known publicly as MI6, occupies a distinct position in the world of espionage. Its reputation blends reserved professionalism with quiet effectiveness, shaped by a century of operations that spanned colonial outposts, world wars, and the complexities of the modern global order. While other agencies project power through size or bold action, MI6 is often defined by discretion, a reflection of the British intelligence culture it represents. The origins of MI6 trace back to 1909, when the British government created the Secret Service Bureau to counter threats from Imperial Germany. The Bureau was split into two branches, one focused on domestic concerns, later MI5, and the other on foreign intelligence, the precursor to what would become MI6. Initially operating from modest offices, the organization began building a network of agents in European capitals, naval ports, and colonies. During World War I, MI6 expanded rapidly, focusing on intercepting communications, monitoring foreign embassies, and establishing field stations. Its early successes were built on traditional British strengths: maritime access, diplomatic ties, and a wide network of imperial assets. Its officers often came from elite universities and military backgrounds, bringing with them a culture of loyalty, secrecy, and strategic patience. The interwar years were marked by both innovation and internal rivalry. MI6 clashed with other intelligence bodies, such as the Foreign Office and MI5, over jurisdiction and operational scope. Still, the agency continued to refine its methods, emphasizing human intelligence, humanity, and long-term placement of agents. The use of diplomatic cover became standard, with intelligence officers assigned to embassies across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. World War II brought both pressure and prestige. MI6 played a vital role in the broader British intelligence effort, which included Bletchley Park's codebreakers and the Special Operations Executive, SOE, created to conduct sabotage and support resistance movements. MI6 focused on agent recruitment, infiltration, and analysis. Its successes included obtaining German military plans, supporting anti-Nazi networks, and coordinating with Allied intelligence services. However, the war also exposed vulnerabilities. Soviet double agents such as Kim Philby had already infiltrated MI6 by the 1942nd, a breach that would haunt the agency for decades. The post-war era placed MI6 at the center of the Cold War. As the ideological divide between East and West hardened, the agency developed a global strategy focused on Soviet influence, nuclear proliferation, and regional instability. MI6 operatives worked in Berlin, Tehran, Nairobi, and countless other cities, building alliances, staging coups, and feeding intelligence back to London. The agency's close relationship with the American CIA allowed for joint operations, shared technology, and reciprocal access. Yet, MI6 maintained its own style. Unlike the more overt interventions favored by some allies, British intelligence often preferred indirect influence, subtle diplomacy, and patient cultivation of sources. Its officers were known not for bravado but for understatement, a reflection of both institutional culture and operational philosophy. One of the most significant scandals in MI6's history was the Cambridge Five, a group of British double agents who passed information to the Soviet Union for years. Their betrayal exposed weaknesses in vetting and oversight and prompted a re-evaluation of recruitment practices. In response, MI6 became more careful about internal security and adopted stricter protocols for agent clearance and supervision. In the modern era, MI6 has adapted to new threats: terrorism, cyber warfare, and transnational crime. The agency recruits individuals with skills in languages, data science, engineering, and cultural expertise. Its headquarters at Vauxhall Cross in London, once a secret, is now a publicly recognized symbol of British intelligence. Yet the agency remains shielded from most scrutiny. Its operations, budgets, and even staff identities are classified. Unlike the CIA or Mossad, MI6 rarely claims public credit. Its victories are often known only to a small circle of decision-makers. British law prohibits former officers from disclosing classified experiences, which has limited the memoirs and leaks that define intelligence culture elsewhere. This silence is not accidental. It is embedded in the ethos of the agency. MI6 continues to operate in over 100 countries, pursuing British strategic interests quietly and persistently. Its strength lies not in its visibility, but in its ability to remain unnoticed, to influence without noise, and to move within the narrow spaces between diplomacy and espionage. In the realm of intelligence, that style has often proved its own kind of power. The Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, of the United States stands as one of the most powerful and scrutinized intelligence services in the world. Established in 1947 under the National Security Act, the CIA was designed to centralize foreign intelligence gathering in the aftermath of World War II. Its creation reflected a new global reality. The United States had emerged as a superpower, and with that position came a permanent need to collect, analyze, and act upon global information. The CIA succeeded the Wartime Office of Strategic Services, OSS, absorbing many of its personnel, practices, and ethos. From the beginning, the agency was tasked with two major functions: gathering foreign intelligence and conducting covert operations. It was explicitly prohibited from operating domestically, a boundary maintained to prevent overlap with the FBI and to protect civil liberties, though in practice this separation has not always been absolute. Structurally, the CIA is divided into several directorates. The Directorate of Operations, DO, is responsible for human intelligence, the recruitment and handling of foreign assets, undercover assignments, and clandestine missions abroad. These field officers are often stationed under diplomatic cover in embassies or consulates and spend years cultivating relationships to gain insight into foreign governments, militaries, and non-state actors. The Directorate of Analysis, DA, processes information gathered from all sources, human, signals, imagery, and open source, and produces reports for US policymakers. These assessments influence decisions at the highest levels, including the President's daily brief, a classified intelligence summary delivered each morning. The quality and framing of these reports can shape foreign policy, military planning, and economic strategy. The Directorate of Science and Technology, DS&T, develops and deploys tools for intelligence collection, from surveillance satellites and advanced sensors to cyber intrusion capabilities. Many innovations attributed to American defense technology, including early drones and satellite imagery, have roots in CIA research initiatives. The Directorate of Support, DS, handles logistics, security, and personnel matters. This includes creating false identities, arranging transportation, and managing the infrastructure that allows operatives to function in hostile or non-permissive environments. In recent years, the Directorate of Digital Innovation, DDI, was established to strengthen the agency's cyber capabilities and keep pace with the growing role of digital systems in global intelligence. Throughout its history, the CIA has been involved in some of the most controversial operations of the 20th century. During the Cold War, it supported coups in Iran 1953 and Guatemala 1954, backed anti-communist regimes in Latin America, and trained insurgents in Southeast Asia. The rationale was containment of Soviet influence, but the long-term consequences of these actions remain the subject of intense debate. In some cases, short-term strategic gains were followed by instability or blowback. The CIA also played a major role in the Soviet-Afghan War, funneling weapons and support to the Mujahideen through Pakistan. In the 1982, its involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, a secret arms for hostages deal that violated congressional limits, exposed internal weaknesses in oversight and accountability. After the September 11 attacks in 2001, the CIA was thrust into a new mission: counter-terrorism. It led drone strike campaigns, ran detention sites abroad, and conducted interrogations using enhanced techniques, many of which were later criticized as torture. The Senate Intelligence Committee conducted a major investigation, revealing internal disagreements and ethical breaches. These events led to widespread reforms and a reassertion of congressional oversight. Despite these challenges, the CIA remains a central pillar of US strategic capability. It operates in over 100 countries and maintains liaison relationships with numerous foreign intelligence services. Its analysts and field officers contribute to everything from nuclear proliferation assessments to the disruption of terrorist financing networks. The agency's power lies not just in what it sees, but in how it connects information across time, place, and context. Public perception of the CIA has fluctuated, from admiration to suspicion, from cinematic mystique to journalistic scrutiny. Yet the agency continues to adapt. Its recruitment now targets a broader skill set, including language specialists, cultural analysts, and data scientists. The clandestine world is changing, and the CIA is attempting to evolve with it. For all its secrecy, the agency's enduring challenge remains clear: to provide reliable intelligence in an unpredictable world, while balancing secrecy with accountability and action with restraint. In the long arc of American statecraft, the CIA is not just a silent witness, it is often the hidden hand guiding the next move. Russian intelligence has a long, complex history, shaped by imperial legacy, ideological conflict, and strategic depth. In the modern era, two organizations dominate Russia's external espionage landscape: the GRU and the SVR. Though they operate separately, their roles often overlap, creating a dual-track system that reflects both military priorities and state-level foreign policy. The GRU, short for Glavnoy Razvedivatelnoy Upravlenie, or Main Intelligence Directorate, is Russia's military intelligence agency. Founded in 1918 during the Russian Civil War, it predates the KGB and has remained under the Ministry of Defense. Its core responsibilities include gathering military intelligence, supporting battlefield operations, and executing covert missions abroad. Unlike its civilian counterparts, the GRU is deeply embedded in Russia's armed forces, providing real-time intelligence for both strategic and tactical decision-making. The SVR, or Sluzba Внешней Razvedki, was established in 1991 as the successor to the first chief directorate of the KGB. It is responsible for non-military foreign intelligence, political developments, economic data, and diplomatic maneuvering. The SVR operates independently from the FSB, Russia's domestic security service, and reports directly to the president. Its operations are often more subtle and long-term in nature, focused on human intelligence and political influence. While the GRU and SVR have distinct missions, they sometimes compete for resources, influence, and targets. This internal rivalry has created tensions within the Russian intelligence community, but it has also allowed for a kind of redundancy, a safeguard against any one agency becoming too powerful or insulated. GRU operations are typically bold and kinetic. The agency has been linked to a wide range of activities: the annexation of Crimea, cyber attacks on foreign elections, sabotage efforts in Europe, and support for separatist movements. Its operatives are often military trained and operate under both official and non-official covers. In 2018, GRU agents were implicated in the poisoning of former double agent Sergei Skripal in the United Kingdom, an event that drew global condemnation and revealed the agency's willingness to use chemical agents on foreign soil. The GRU also runs cyber units known by names assigned by Western intelligence groups, such as Fancy Bear or APT-28. These teams conduct hacking operations against political parties, media outlets, and critical infrastructure. Their goal is often not just to steal information, but to disrupt, embarrass, or destabilize adversaries. The line between military operation and psychological warfare is increasingly blurred. The SVR, in contrast, operates more like a traditional spy agency. It recruits foreign diplomats, business people, and academics to gather intelligence or influence policy. Its officers often operate out of embassies under diplomatic cover, enjoying legal protections that make expulsion more likely than arrest. The SVR focuses on cultivating long-term assets and infiltrating foreign institutions. It is less visible than the GRU but no less active. Both agencies have benefited from a deep Russian tradition of tradecraft. The use of illegals, deep cover agents with no official link to Russia, has been a long-standing tactic. These individuals live ordinary lives in foreign countries for years, even decades, before being activated. In 2010, the United States uncovered a ring of Russian illegals, including the now famous Anna Chapman, highlighting the ongoing relevance of Cold War-era techniques. Russian intelligence services also engage in active measures, disinformation campaigns designed to sow confusion, distrust, and division within target societies. These efforts include fake news, social media manipulation, and support for extremist groups. The goal is not always to persuade, but to paralyze decision-making and erode consensus. Oversight of Russian intelligence is minimal. The president wields significant control, and transparency is limited. While Western agencies operate under legal frameworks and parliamentary scrutiny, Russia's services function in a more opaque environment, where accountability often depends on political loyalty rather than institutional norms. Despite sanctions and international scrutiny, Russian intelligence remains aggressive, well-resourced, and globally active. It operates on the assumption that information warfare is not a supplement to military power, it is military power. In the Russian worldview, control over perception, narrative, and surprise is as valuable as any conventional weapon. China's intelligence system operates on a scale and structure unlike most of its global counterparts. Rather than separate functions divided among multiple agencies, China's approach reflects a unified state model, where intelligence, influence, and internal security are closely interwoven under centralized control. Two of the most influential arms in this apparatus are the Ministry of State Security, MSS, and the United Front Work Department, UFWD. Each plays a distinct role, yet both are central to China's efforts to protect the state and shape the world beyond its borders. The Ministry of State Security is China's primary civilian intelligence agency. Founded in 1983, the MSS combines the responsibilities typically divided between agencies like the CIA and the FBI in Western countries. It conducts foreign intelligence operations, domestic counterintelligence, political surveillance, cyber espionage, and ideological enforcement. Though technically under the State Council, the MSS ultimately answers to the Communist Party's Central Committee, reinforcing its role as a tool of party control, not just state security. MSS operations abroad are often low-profile but far-reaching. The agency has been implicated in the theft of commercial secrets, military technology, and sensitive academic research from companies, universities, and government agencies worldwide. These operations are not always conducted by career spies. MSS frequently recruits scientists, business people, and students, either through formal channels or by applying pressure to cooperate with Chinese interests. Its operatives often blend economic engagement with intelligence objectives, a tactic sometimes called fusion espionage. Cyber operations are a growing part of the MSS's reach. Chinese hackers linked to the ministry have penetrated defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, and infrastructure networks in countries across Europe, North America, and Asia. These campaigns often focus not only on traditional intelligence targets, but on collecting the raw material for technological leapfrogging, from artificial intelligence research to aviation blueprints. While attribution can be difficult, patterns in attack techniques and infrastructure have tied many operations to MSS front companies and regional bureaus. The MSS also operates inside China to suppress dissent and monitor potential threats to Communist Party rule. It tracks religious groups, ethnic minorities, political activists, and foreign NGOs. Surveillance is ubiquitous. Facial recognition cameras, biometric databases, and AI-driven monitoring systems help build detailed behavioral profiles of individuals. Informants are placed in communities, and social media is tightly regulated. Dissent is not merely discouraged, it is preemptively identified and neutralized. Parallel to this is the United Front Work Department, an organ of the Communist Party tasked with shaping perception and influence abroad. Unlike the MSS, the UFWD is not an intelligence agency in the conventional sense. It doesn't collect secrets, it cultivates relationships. Its mission is to guide political, academic, and cultural organizations, especially those involving ethnic Chinese communities, to align with Beijing's interests. The United Front operates through soft power. It funds academic partnerships, sponsors cultural exchanges, and works through overseas Chinese associations. It encourages Chinese diaspora communities to support government policies, discourages criticism of the party, and amplifies narratives favorable to Beijing. While many of these efforts appear benign, they often blur the line between diplomacy and influence operation. The UFWD also works to shape elite opinion. Politicians, business leaders, and scholars may be invited to attend lavish conferences, given economic incentives, or offered media platforms, all while being subtly encouraged to adopt positions aligned with Chinese policy. In democratic societies, where lobbying and influence are part of normal politics, the United Front's approach is difficult to regulate, yet its messaging can shift public discourse in ways that serve strategic interests. Together, the MSS and UFWD reflect China's belief that information control and narrative dominance are strategic imperatives. Where Western intelligence often focuses on specific threats or events, China's model emphasizes long-term influence, ideological alignment, and systemic stability. It is not just about preventing war or gathering secrets. It is about shaping environments to avoid confrontation entirely, by ensuring that challenges never materialize in the first place. China's intelligence posture is evolving. Its global reach is expanding, and its tools are becoming more sophisticated. The challenge for other nations is not only understanding how the MSS and United Front operate, but recognizing that much of their activity occurs in plain sight, embedded in business, education, and diplomacy, yet shaped by strategic intent. France and Germany each developed distinct intelligence traditions, shaped by their histories, political cultures, and national traumas. Though they operate within the same democratic and European framework today, their services reflect divergent philosophies in the balance between secrecy and accountability, state power and civil liberty, action and restraint. France's external intelligence agency is the Direction Générale de la Sécurité Extérieure, DGSE, created in 1982 as the successor to earlier services that date back to the Second World War and colonial conflicts. It handles foreign intelligence collection, covert operations, and counter-terrorism abroad. Internally, France relies on the Direction Générale de la Sécurité Intérieure, DGSI, for domestic security and surveillance. The DGSE is known for its autonomy and aggressive posture. Historically, it has been less constrained by oversight than its counterparts in some other democracies. It has conducted operations that range from intercepting foreign communications to influencing political developments in former French colonies. Its Service Action Division is responsible for paramilitary and sabotage operations, including direct interventions such as destroying enemy assets or supporting insurgents. DGSE operatives undergo rigorous training in espionage, demolition, language, and infiltration techniques. One of the most controversial moments in the DGSE's history came in 1985 when it bombed the Greenpeace ship Rainbow Warrior in New Zealand, to prevent it from interfering with French nuclear tests in the Pacific. The operation led to the death of a photographer, global condemnation, and the arrest of French agents. It remains a cautionary tale of the risks that come with covert action, even when justified internally as national interest. In recent decades, French intelligence has focused heavily on counter-terrorism. Following a wave of jihadist attacks in Paris and other cities, the DGSI expanded its surveillance capabilities and deepened its cooperation with the DGSE, military intelligence, and international partners. France also plays an active role in intelligence sharing within the European Union and NATO, particularly in operations across the Sahel region of Africa, where French forces have long-standing counter-terrorism engagements. Germany, by contrast, operates under a more restrained intelligence culture, rooted in the country's post-war constitution and the legacy of totalitarian surveillance under both the Nazis and the East German Stasi. The Bundesnachrichtendienst, BND, is Germany's foreign intelligence agency, reporting directly to the Chancellor's office. Domestically, the Bundesamt für Verfassungsschutz, BFV, is responsible for counterintelligence, extremism monitoring, and constitutional protection. The BND was formally established in 1956 but traces its roots to the Gehlen organization, a post-war intelligence unit led by former Wehrmacht officer Reinhard Gehlen and supported by the US. It focused on gathering intelligence about the Soviet Union during the Cold War and operated with significant American support. The agency gradually came under full German control, but retained a cautious operational style, shaped by constitutional limitations and a strong emphasis on legal process. Unlike the DGSE, the BND operates with a higher degree of transparency and is subject to parliamentary oversight. The Parlamentarisches Kontrollgremium, PKGR, reviews its activities, and specific surveillance programs must be approved by the G10 Commission, named after Article 10 of the German Basic Law, which protects communication privacy. These mechanisms reflect a deep national commitment to civil liberties and a wariness of unchecked state power. Despite these constraints, the BND is active in cyber defense, political analysis, and international liaison. It monitors foreign governments, tracks weapons proliferation, and supports German military deployments abroad with situational awareness. Germany's intelligence services also face challenges from far-right and far-left extremist groups, foreign influence campaigns, and disinformation targeting democratic institutions. France and Germany differ not only in their operational styles but also in public attitudes toward intelligence. In France, covert action is often accepted as a necessary extension of sovereign power. In Germany, intelligence must navigate a more skeptical public and a complex legal framework. These differences affect everything from how services are structured to how they cooperate with foreign partners. Yet both countries are evolving. The rise of transnational threats, terrorism, cyber attacks, disinformation, has pushed their services toward closer collaboration, both bilaterally and through multilateral organizations. Shared platforms, intelligence fusion centers, and joint task forces are now common, even as each maintains its national character. In the broader landscape of global intelligence, France and Germany represent two poles within the democratic world, one leaning toward bold unilateralism, the other toward cautious multilateralism. Each reflects the lessons of its past and the pressures of its present, moving through the invisible corridors of power with a rhythm uniquely its own. Signals intelligence, often abbreviated as SIGINT, is one of the most powerful and secretive arms of modern espionage. It refers to the interception and analysis of electronic communications, phone calls, emails, radio signals, satellite transmissions, and even radar emissions. Unlike human intelligence, which relies on individual relationships and personal risk, SIGINT operates through infrastructure, antennas, fiber optic taps, algorithms, and satellites. It is the invisible scaffolding of global surveillance. The origins of signals intelligence stretch back to the earliest use of telegraph and radio. During World War I, armies intercepted and decrypted each other's coded messages. By World War II, entire facilities like Britain's Bletchley Park were dedicated to cracking enemy encryption, laying the groundwork for both computing and modern cryptanalysis. Since then, SIGINT has evolved alongside every advance in communication technology. In the United States, SIGINT is primarily handled by the National Security Agency, NSA, established in 1952. The NSA operates global listening stations, maintains satellites, and collaborates with private telecommunications providers to access vast quantities of data. It focuses on both content, the actual words spoken or written, and metadata, such as who contacted whom, when, and for how long. This metadata, while seemingly mundane, allows analysts to construct relationship networks and detect unusual behavior patterns. The United Kingdom's counterpart is GCHQ, the Government Communications Headquarters. Located in Cheltenham, GCHQ works closely with the NSA and shares intercepted intelligence through the Five Eyes Alliance, a long-standing partnership between the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. This alliance allows member states to divide surveillance responsibilities geographically and share raw data across borders. Signals intelligence is not limited to English-speaking nations. Russia operates its own global network through the FSB and military units, such as the GRU's 85th Main Special Service Center. China's People's Liberation Army Strategic Support Force oversees electronic surveillance across Asia and beyond. Israel's Unit 8200, a branch of its military intelligence, is widely respected for its technical innovation and cyber operations. France, Germany, India, and many other nations maintain advanced SIGINT capabilities tailored to their regional interests. The physical infrastructure of signals intelligence is vast and often hidden in plain sight. Large satellite dishes, remote listening posts, and submarine cable intercept stations form a web of data collection points. Some of the most valuable information flows through undersea fiber optic cables that connect continents. Tapping these cables, with or without the cooperation of telecom providers, gives agencies access to international email traffic, financial transactions, and cloud services. Encryption presents both a challenge and a catalyst for innovation. As more communication becomes encrypted end-to-end, SIGINT agencies invest heavily in cryptographic research, backdoors, and zero-day vulnerabilities, undisclosed software flaws that can be exploited. They also use traffic analysis, which doesn't require reading messages, but instead analyzes communication patterns to identify suspicious activity. One of the most controversial aspects of modern SIGINT is mass surveillance. Leaked documents from whistleblowers have revealed programs capable of collecting data from millions of users worldwide, including civilians with no connection to criminal or national security investigations. This has led to intense debates about privacy, oversight, and the limits of intelligence gathering in democratic societies. Legally, SIGINT operates in a grey zone. Agencies often rely on secret court orders, classified agreements, or executive directives. Oversight mechanisms exist, such as legislative intelligence committees or independent review boards, but the sheer complexity and secrecy of SIGINT make accountability difficult. Critics argue that without stronger controls, technical capability may outpace ethical restraint. Despite the controversies, signals intelligence remains essential. It tracks the movements of terrorists, monitors nuclear development, detects cyber attacks, and provides early warning of military escalations. During armed conflict, it helps locate enemy forces and intercept battlefield commands. During peace, it provides a steady stream of insight, into foreign governments' intentions and capabilities. What makes SIGINT unique is its scale. It is not a conversation, it is a chorus. Thousands of signals, bouncing between devices and across borders, form a digital landscape that can be read, mapped, and mined. The power of this intelligence lies not just in hearing a secret, but in listening to everything and knowing what to notice. Cyber intelligence has become the fastest evolving frontier in modern espionage. Unlike traditional forms of intelligence, rooted in human relationships or radio signals, cyber intelligence operates across a digital terrain where geography becomes irrelevant. Its tools are algorithms, exploits, and code. Its actors can be governments, criminal syndicates, or individuals, and its impact reaches into almost every aspect of modern life: infrastructure, elections, finance, research, and communication. The distinction between cyber warfare and cyber intelligence is often subtle. Intelligence gathering involves intrusion without disruption, entering systems, mapping networks, extracting data. Warfare crosses the line into sabotage, shutting down power grids, damaging centrifuges, or erasing data. Yet, in practice, the same vulnerabilities are used for both. The key difference lies in intent, not technique. Major intelligence services have developed cyber units to conduct both offensive and defensive operations. In the United States, the National Security Agency, NSA, houses both the intelligence gathering mission and a military counterpart known as U.S. Cyber Command. These institutions work side by side, sharing infrastructure and expertise. The NSA has been linked to some of the most sophisticated cyber tools ever discovered, including the infamous Stuxnet worm, which targeted Iran's nuclear centrifuges in a covert US-Israeli operation. China's cyber capabilities are vast and integrated. Units like PLA, Unit 61398, and the Ministry of State Security, MSS, oversee cyber espionage campaigns against foreign governments, corporations, and universities. These operations often focus on long-term economic advantage, acquiring trade secrets, proprietary technology, and sensitive research. Attacks are sometimes staged through front companies, compromised supply chains, or seemingly ordinary phishing emails that carry malicious payloads. Russia's cyber doctrine emphasizes both intelligence gathering and psychological operations. The GRU, Russia's military intelligence agency, has been tied to high-profile breaches, including intrusions into political parties, disinformation campaigns, and ransomware attacks. Russian cyber units often operate through proxies, criminal groups, or freelance hackers, allowing the state to deny involvement while maintaining plausible influence. In several incidents, cyber intrusions have been used to destabilize elections, sow distrust, or provoke geopolitical tension without a single soldier crossing a border. Other nations are increasingly active in the cyber domain. North Korea has used cyber operations to steal cryptocurrency and target financial institutions, circumventing sanctions through digital theft. Iran has targeted critical infrastructure and rival governments. Israel's Unit 8200, known for innovation, has contributed to both intelligence collection and offensive cyber strategy. Across the globe, cyber units are now standard components of national security architecture. Cyber intelligence extends far beyond headline-grabbing breaches. It also includes silent, persistent monitoring. Intelligence agencies gain access to email servers, cloud platforms, and secure communication tools. They use zero-day vulnerabilities, flaws unknown to software developers, to enter systems undetected. Once inside, they can harvest data for years, observing without altering, listening without revealing presence. Defensive cyber intelligence is equally critical. Agencies track indicators of compromise, IOCs, monitor for anomalies in traffic, and develop threat intelligence feeds to anticipate attacks. National Computer Emergency Response Teams, CERTs, coordinate with private industry, sharing data and mitigation strategies. In many countries, intelligence services partner with telecom companies and tech firms to create early warning systems, though this often raises concerns about privacy and the role of government in civilian networks. Attribution remains one of the biggest challenges in cyber intelligence. Unlike a missile or a passport, a line of code does not declare its origin. False flags, reused malware, and anonymized connections can obscure the source of an attack. This makes strategic decision-making difficult. Should a country retaliate when it cannot definitively identify its adversary? Legal and ethical questions are also mounting. Should cyber intrusions be considered acts of war? What level of surveillance is appropriate in peacetime? When should vulnerabilities be disclosed, and when should they be kept secret for future use? Intelligence agencies now face not only technical dilemmas, but policy ones, often in real time. In today's connected world, every device is a potential access point. Every system, no matter how secure, contains vulnerabilities. Cyber intelligence thrives in that uncertainty. It is not just a tool, it is a domain, one where borders blur and silence itself becomes a tactic. As nations compete in this digital landscape, the battle is no longer for land or oil, but for knowledge, access, and control. Terrorism has reshaped the mission and methods of intelligence services around the world. While traditional espionage was once focused on rival states and military capabilities, the rise of non-state actors has demanded a different kind of vigilance, one rooted in detection, prevention, and disruption of plots that are often decentralized and ideologically driven. In response, counterintelligence, historically used to detect spies, has been retooled to confront hidden threats within civilian populations. The attacks of September 11th marked a global turning point. Intelligence agencies around the world reoriented toward counterterrorism. New legal powers were granted, budgets expanded, and cross-agency cooperation accelerated. Services that once competed for resources found themselves forced to collaborate, sharing intelligence on jihadist networks, radicalized individuals, and global funding streams. Counterintelligence, in this context, shifted focus. While it still guards against espionage and insider threats, it now also tracks potential terror cells, lone actors, and recruitment efforts. It looks not just for moles, but for warning signs, unusual travel patterns, encrypted online activity, unexplained financial movements. Where once counterintelligence was about defending secrets, it has become equally about detecting danger before it materializes. Western agencies face particular challenges in balancing liberty with security. Democracies are legally constrained in how they monitor their own citizens. Intelligence agencies rely on judicial approvals, surveillance warrants, and privacy laws. Yet terrorists often exploit open societies to move unnoticed. This tension creates a high-stakes environment. Miss a threat, and lives are lost. Overreach, and civil liberties erode. The UK's MI5, responsible for domestic security, operates under a mandate to detect and disrupt terror plots on British soil. It works closely with the police and GCHQ to monitor suspects, intercept communications, and respond to emerging threats. The agency emphasizes preemptive disruption, acting before attacks occur, even if that means arresting suspects on lesser charges or using administrative powers like travel bans. In France, the DGSI has adapted to years of internal threats. After the Charlie Hebdo and Bataclan attacks, France declared a state of emergency, expanded its domestic intelligence capabilities, and increased electronic surveillance. It monitors radicalized individuals through watch lists and coordinates with prison services, recognizing that many attacks are planned or incubated within correctional facilities. The United States developed the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and elevated the FBI's counterterrorism role. The National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, was created to fuse data from the CIA, NSA, FBI, and international partners. Algorithms now flag suspicious behavior, artificial intelligence scans vast data sets, and fusion centers allow local and federal agencies to cooperate in real time. Still, the decentralized nature of terror threats, lone wolves, radicalized online, means that no system is foolproof. Outside the West, many countries use more expansive legal powers. In Russia, the FSB tracks both domestic extremists and foreign-linked networks with sweeping authority. In China, the definition of terrorism often includes ethnic separatism, and counterterrorism efforts are tightly linked with population control policies. These approaches raise questions of definition. When does national security become repression? Islamist extremism remains a core concern, but intelligence agencies also track other ideologies. Far-right terrorism has surged in recent years, particularly in the United States and Europe. Attacks motivated by white supremacy, anti-government views, or conspiracy theories are now seen as national security issues, not just criminal matters. Similarly, left-wing and anarchist movements are monitored in countries where they pose threats to infrastructure or political stability. Financial intelligence plays a critical role in counterterrorism. Agencies monitor global banking transactions, charity flows, and informal money networks like Hawala. Front organizations and cryptocurrency are now part of the equation. Disrupting financing can be as effective as seizing weapons, since many plots depend on modest but essential funding. Human sources are vital in this fight. Informants within communities, flipped operatives, or defectors provide the kind of granular intelligence that algorithms cannot. But recruiting and protecting such sources requires deep trust and long-term investment. Missteps can alienate entire communities, leading to silence where vigilance is needed most. In the realm of counterterrorism, success is often invisible. An attack that never occurs does not make headlines, but it represents the culmination of layered surveillance, shared intelligence, and split-second decisions. Intelligence services walk a narrow path between vigilance and intrusion, between security and freedom, and each choice leaves its own invisible mark on the societies they protect. Intelligence services operate in the shadows, but when they fail, the consequences are vividly public. The nature of intelligence work, anticipatory, incomplete, often invisible, means that success is quiet, but failure is loud. When a threat is missed, or a judgment is flawed, lives are lost, wars begin, or national trust erodes. These failures serve as lessons and warnings, revealing the limits of even the most advanced systems. One of the most significant intelligence failures in modern history was the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The United States and its allies justified the war based on assessments that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, WMDs. These assessments were supported by documents, satellite images, and testimony from informants. But the information was deeply flawed. A combination of faulty sources, groupthink, and political pressure led to conclusions that were not supported by concrete evidence. The consequences were immense. The war destabilized the region, caused hundreds of thousands of deaths, and damaged the credibility of Western intelligence agencies. Investigations in the US, UK, and other countries revealed breakdowns in vetting, analysis, and interagency communication. The episode became a case study in how intelligence can be distorted, not just by error, but by agenda. Another striking example was the failure to prevent the September 11th attacks. In the years leading up to 2001, multiple US agencies, including the CIA, FBI, and NSA, had gathered fragments of information about Al-Qaeda operatives, possible plots, and suspicious flight training, but the data remained siloed. Agencies failed to share key findings, warnings were not elevated, and patterns were not fully connected. In hindsight, the clues were present, but the systems were not prepared to integrate or act on them. The result was not only national tragedy, but also a massive restructuring of the American intelligence apparatus. New departments, databases, and protocols were created to improve information flow. But the lingering question remains: can a system built to handle Cold War threats adapt fast enough to new asymmetric dangers? In Israel, the 1973 Yom Kippur War revealed how overconfidence can blind even highly capable intelligence agencies. The Israeli Defense Forces were caught off guard by coordinated attacks from Egypt and Syria. Despite some advance warnings, Israeli intelligence discounted them, relying on the assumption that Arab states would not risk another war. This misjudgment, later known as the concept, was rooted in strategic arrogance and led to severe early losses. It forced a national reckoning and reforms in both military planning and intelligence assessment. Russia's war in Ukraine has exposed another kind of failure: the gap between strategic ambition and tactical reality. In 2022, Russian intelligence reportedly misjudged the strength of Ukrainian resistance, the loyalty of Ukrainian political figures, and the international response. The result was a campaign that faltered early and triggered global sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and a prolonged conflict. These failures highlighted the risks of political distortion within intelligence services, when assessments are shaped to please leaders, not reflect reality. Failures are not always about missing data. Sometimes, the data exists, but interpretation falters. In the case of the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the CIA had a large presence in Tehran and access to local networks, but it failed to predict the collapse of the Shah's regime or the rise of a theocratic government. Analysts underestimated the strength of religious movements and overestimated the regime's stability. Cultural bias, limited access to opposition voices, and assumptions about modernity blinded intelligence to the signals of systemic collapse. Some failures arise from internal betrayal. The case of Aldrich Ames, a CIA officer who spied for the Soviet Union, led to the deaths of multiple US informants in the 1980 seconds. He operated undetected for years, passing secrets to the KGB while maintaining a seemingly ordinary lifestyle. His exposure forced a re-evaluation of internal vetting and the vulnerabilities that lie within, not just outside, the agency walls. The public consequences of intelligence failures are not only strategic but societal. Trust in government erodes. Political decisions are questioned. Conspiracy theories thrive in the vacuum left by secrecy and misjudgment. Each failure reminds the world that intelligence is not omniscient. It is a human craft, shaped by bias, pressure, and imperfection. Surveillance is the lens through which intelligence agencies observe the world. With the rise of digital technology, that lens has become sharper, broader, and far more penetrating. From satellite imaging and facial recognition to internet metadata and biometric scanning, the tools of surveillance have advanced faster than the frameworks that regulate them. At the heart of this transformation lies a central tension: the balance between security and privacy. Modern surveillance systems are built on layers. At the base are traditional methods: human observation, stakeouts, and wiretaps. But layered on top are vast technological networks: traffic cameras with real-time facial recognition, drones equipped with heat sensors, AI-driven behavior analysis tools, and phone metadata analysis capable of mapping entire social networks. These technologies allow intelligence agencies to monitor threats across great distances in real time with unprecedented granularity. One of the most significant shifts came with the proliferation of smartphones and digital communication. Every message, call, app, and location ping creates a data trail. Intelligence agencies collect, store, and analyze these trails using powerful algorithms designed to detect anomalies or patterns that may signal risk. While some of this data is gathered with legal warrants and court oversight, large portions are acquired through bulk collection programs, especially outside the agency's own borders. Closed-circuit television (CCTV) systems have become a foundational part of urban surveillance. In cities like London, millions of cameras record movement, feeding into analytics systems that flag suspicious behaviors. China has taken this further, implementing surveillance infrastructure that combines video, gait recognition, voice prints, and real-time scoring systems in some regions. These systems don't just watch, they evaluate. Biometric surveillance is another expanding frontier. Airports, borders, and even public events now rely on facial recognition to verify identities against watch lists. Voice recognition, fingerprint scanning, and iris detection are used for both security access and surveillance. These tools are fast, efficient, and scalable, but they also raise questions about consent and misuse. Artificial intelligence amplifies all these capabilities. Machine learning models are trained on vast datasets to detect threats, recognize faces, decode languages, and predict behavior. Predictive policing tools aim to forecast where crimes or attacks might occur based on past data. But AI systems can inherit the biases in their training data, leading to disproportionate scrutiny of certain communities or inaccurate targeting. The ethics of surveillance have become a global debate. What level of monitoring is justified to prevent a potential attack? Should citizens have the right to know when they are being observed? Is surveillance more acceptable in public spaces than private digital domains? Different nations answer these questions differently. In authoritarian systems, surveillance is often pervasive and normalized. In democracies, it is regulated, but not always transparently. Whistleblowers and investigative journalists have exposed how some surveillance programs exceeded legal boundaries or targeted individuals without sufficient cause. The revelations by Edward Snowden in 2013 showed how agencies like the NSA operated programs that collected the communications data of millions of people, including allied governments. These disclosures sparked legal reforms, but also deeper public skepticism about the extent and accountability of intelligence operations. Surveillance is not only a state tool. Private companies also collect enormous volumes of data. From GPS locations to browsing histories, corporations often know more about individuals than governments do. Intelligence agencies increasingly partner with these firms or acquire commercial data sets. This creates a gray zone where surveillance is outsourced, blurring lines between public oversight and private profit. Some governments have attempted to place surveillance under stricter control. Independent oversight bodies, judicial review processes, transparency reports, and audit trails are meant to ensure that surveillance remains proportionate and legal. But these systems vary widely by country, and enforcement can be weak or politicized. The ethics of surveillance are not just legal, they are philosophical. What kind of society emerges when every move is watched? Does constant observation lead to conformity, fear, or disengagement? Does it protect freedom or quietly corrode it? These questions are not just for lawmakers or intelligence chiefs, they are for citizens too. In the end, surveillance is a tool, neither inherently good nor bad. Its impact depends on who wields it, how they use it, and whether the society being watched agrees to the terms. As technology advances, the rules we write today will shape not only how we are seen, but how we live. In authoritarian regimes, intelligence services are not just instruments of national security, they are mechanisms of political control. These agencies do not merely gather information on foreign adversaries or internal threats. They monitor, shape, and suppress the behavior of their own populations. The boundary between national defense and regime preservation becomes indistinguishable. In such systems, intelligence services evolve into entities of power in their own right, often feared, rarely questioned. One of the most enduring examples is the Soviet Union's KGB. More than a spy agency, the KGB functioned as the central nervous system of the state. It tracked political dissidents, censored information, and infiltrated every layer of public life. Writers, teachers, scientists, and artists were all subject to surveillance. Loyalty was not assumed, it was continually assessed. The KGB's reach extended beyond Soviet borders, using embassies, trade delegations, and cultural organizations as covers for espionage. Inside the USSR, its presence created a climate of silence, where distrust was a means of survival. Post-Soviet Russia retains elements of this architecture. The Federal Security Service, FSB, successor to the KGB, operates with significant autonomy. It oversees domestic surveillance, cyber operations, and the suppression of political opposition. Critics of the government, journalists, activists, opposition politicians, often face investigations, legal pressure, or mysterious harm. Intelligence is used not just to protect the state, but to shield the power of those who lead it. In China, the Ministry of State Security, MSS, and other internal security organs enforce ideological conformity and monitor dissent. Surveillance is deeply integrated with everyday life, especially in regions like Xinjiang, where biometric databases, facial recognition, and AI-powered tracking systems are used to monitor the Uyghur population. Religious practices, movement patterns, and even facial expressions can trigger suspicion. Intelligence gathering is not reactive, it is proactive, aimed at anticipating and neutralizing challenges to central authority. North Korea's intelligence apparatus is built on total loyalty to the ruling family. Agencies such as the State Security Department conduct internal purges, monitor foreign contacts, and suppress any deviation from the state ideology. Ordinary citizens are required to report suspicious behavior, and families can be punished collectively for individual infractions. External espionage exists, including cyber operations and abduction of foreign nationals, but the core mission remains domestic control. In Iran, intelligence services serve both religious doctrine and state power. The Ministry of Intelligence and the Intelligence Wing of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, monitor citizens for signs of Western influence, liberalization, or opposition to clerical rule. Surveillance often intensifies during election seasons or periods of protest. Detentions, interrogations, and forced confessions are part of the system's toolkit. Intelligence here is not separated from ideology, it is bound to it. Authoritarian intelligence services often benefit from fewer legal constraints. Warrantless searches, prolonged detention, torture, and surveillance without judicial review are common. The absence of independent courts or a free press removes most avenues for redress. Without transparency, abuse becomes not just possible, it becomes systemic. Yet these agencies are not immune to failure. Over-reliance on fear can distort the quality of information received. Subordinates may avoid reporting bad news to superiors. Intelligence can become tailored to please leadership, rather than reflect the truth. In some cases, the very tools meant to secure the regime contribute to its instability by alienating the public, isolating leadership, and breeding corruption. In authoritarian states, the intelligence service is often not a single body but a network of rival organizations. This fragmentation, intended to prevent any one agency from gaining too much power, can also lead to inefficiency, competition, and paranoia within the system. Leaders may encourage this rivalry as a way to maintain control, but the result is often a climate of suspicion, even among those tasked with ensuring security. Internationally, authoritarian regimes use intelligence to monitor diasporas, intimidate exiles, and suppress criticism abroad. Dissidents in exile have been tracked, harassed, or even assassinated far from their homelands. Embassies sometimes double as intelligence outposts, and cooperation with criminal networks becomes a means of maintaining reach across borders. Intelligence in authoritarian systems is not merely about information, it is about obedience. It serves as both sword and shield, enforcing silence and preserving power. Where intelligence flourishes unchecked, truth becomes negotiable, and fear becomes policy. In the modern world, no intelligence agency operates alone. As threats have become more global, from terrorism and cybercrime to nuclear proliferation and organized crime, international cooperation has become essential. Intelligence sharing is no longer a matter of goodwill between allies. It is a strategic necessity. But this cooperation is built on layers of trust, secrecy, national interest, and sometimes quiet rivalry. The most well-known example of formalized intelligence sharing is the Five Eyes Alliance, an agreement between the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Born during World War II and expanded during the Cold War, Five Eyes represents one of the most comprehensive and deeply integrated intelligence partnerships in history. Member nations share signals intelligence, SIGINT, human intelligence, HUMINT, and cyber threat information almost seamlessly. Their infrastructures are often synchronized and their agencies embedded in each other's processes. But even within alliances, sharing is selective. Each country maintains control over its most sensitive sources and methods. Access can be limited by clearance levels, compartmentalization, or strategic interest. Intelligence is a currency, and while allies trade it generously, they rarely give it away for free. Beyond Five Eyes, a broader network exists: 9 Eyes, 14 Eyes, NATO sharing mechanisms, and regional agreements like the Club de Bern in Europe. These partnerships extend the flow of information while still maintaining inner circles of trust. The US and UK, for instance, might share higher-grade intelligence with each other than with the broader group. Within NATO, intelligence sharing helps coordinate defense planning, cyber readiness, and counter-terrorism efforts across dozens of countries. Multilateral sharing is often coordinated through fusion centers and joint task forces. These collaborative spaces allow analysts from different countries to sit side by side, share live data, and coordinate responses to emerging threats. In counter-terrorism, these hubs have become vital, enabling the tracking of suspects across borders and the interception of plots before they materialize. However, alliances are not free of friction. Differences in legal frameworks, political agendas, and data handling protocols can slow or complicate cooperation. For example, European privacy laws, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, impose strict controls on personal data, affecting how intelligence is shared with partners who have looser standards. These legal tensions can create gaps in coverage or delays in response. Trust is the backbone of any intelligence alliance, and it can be easily shaken. When U.S. intelligence contractor Edward Snowden revealed the extent of American surveillance, including spying on Allied leaders, it triggered diplomatic fallout. Countries like Germany expressed outrage at being monitored by a supposed partner. The episode served as a reminder that intelligence alliances are pragmatic, not unconditional, and that allies sometimes spy on each other, too. Despite this, sharing continues to grow. The complexity of modern threats makes isolation risky. In the realm of cybersecurity, for example, Malware that appears in one country today may hit another tomorrow. Information about tactics, indicators of compromise, or attacker infrastructure must move quickly across borders. The same applies to tracking financial flows used in terrorism or tracing supply chains of weapons proliferation. International organizations also play a role. Interpol provides platforms for law enforcement intelligence sharing. The United Nations supports counter-terrorism cooperation. Specialized forums, such as the Egmont Group, bring financial intelligence units together to share information on money laundering and illicit finance. These networks often operate in parallel to traditional intelligence agencies, creating layers of coordination across sectors. However, intelligence sharing always comes with risk. Once shared, control over how the information is used can be lost. It may be mishandled, leaked, or misinterpreted. There is also the possibility that a shared partner is penetrated by hostile actors, compromising sensitive data. For this reason, agencies are cautious. Every exchange is calculated, every relationship constantly evaluated. Even rival powers sometimes share intelligence. During the early 2000s, there were limited instances of information passed between the US and Russia regarding counterterrorism. In regions like the Arctic or during nuclear negotiations, intelligence can serve as a stabilizing force, offering clarity in tense situations. These exchanges are rare, tightly managed, and often politically delicate, but they demonstrate that even adversaries recognize the value of timely, accurate information. In the end, intelligence sharing is about extending vision. No country can see everything. By linking eyes, ears, and minds across borders, agencies increase their collective awareness, but they also expose themselves to new vulnerabilities. It is a high-stakes partnership, built on layers of benefit, doubt, and necessity. In the 21st century, intelligence no longer belongs solely to the state. Some of the most powerful surveillance tools, behavioral insights, and data repositories are now held by private technology companies. Platforms that began as tools for connection, convenience, and commerce have evolved into vast engines of information collection, and governments have taken notice. Tech giants like Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft process staggering volumes of user data each day. Search queries, location history, message content, contacts, calendar events, facial images, voice recordings. All of this becomes metadata, indexed and stored in data centers spread across continents. These systems understand user behavior more intimately than many national databases. For intelligence agencies, this presents both an opportunity and a challenge. The opportunity lies in access. By partnering with, subpoenaing, or purchasing from tech companies, governments can tap into these data flows, identifying threats, locating suspects, or tracking disinformation campaigns. The challenge, however, is control. These are independent entities with their own rules, interests, and ethical boundaries. They are not arms of the state, and their cooperation is often conditional. One of the clearest intersections of intelligence and tech companies came after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, US. Legislation such as the Patriot Act expanded government access to private data under national security justifications. This led to collaborations and conflicts between intelligence agencies and Silicon Valley. In some cases, tech companies complied quietly. In others, they resisted, citing user privacy and brand trust. Tensions escalated with the revelations of mass surveillance programs such as PRISM, exposed by Edward Snowden in 2013. Documents showed that the National Security Agency, NSA, had accessed data from major tech firms, sometimes with their knowledge, sometimes without. This sparked global backlash. especially in countries whose citizens and leaders were surveilled. In response, many companies introduced end-to-end encryption, transparency reports, and resistance to broad data requests. Apple's public refusal to unlock an iPhone used by a terrorist suspect in the 2015 San Bernardino attack became a defining moment. The FBI argued for national security access. Apple argued for user privacy and the risks of creating backdoors. The case was eventually resolved without Apple's help, but the underlying debate remains unresolved. When does national security outweigh digital privacy? Tech companies are not just data holders, they are also intelligence actors. They monitor user behavior for fraud, extremism, and harmful content. Their AI systems flag terrorist recruitment materials, track bot networks, and identify patterns of abuse. Sometimes, these insights are shared with law enforcement or intelligence partners. Sometimes, they are not. Decisions are influenced by internal policies, public image concerns, and jurisdictional complexities. Social media platforms, in particular, play a central role in information warfare. Intelligence agencies monitor platforms for foreign influence operations, disinformation campaigns, and coordinated manipulation. Companies like Meta and X, formerly Twitter, have developed internal teams dedicated to election integrity and content moderation. Yet these efforts vary widely in scope, and enforcement can be inconsistent, especially when it affects engagement metrics or market access. Cloud providers, such as Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud, also host critical infrastructure for both the private and public sectors. Intelligence agencies increasingly rely on cloud computing for data storage, processing, and analysis. The lines blur further when cloud vendors win government contracts, such as the Pentagon's Joint Warfighting Cloud Capability, JWCC. These contracts link private infrastructure with national security operations, raising questions about accountability and resilience. Cybersecurity firms, many of them private, often discover vulnerabilities and threat actors before governments do. Companies like Mandiant, CrowdStrike, and Palantir analyze advanced persistent threats, APTs, many of which originate from state-sponsored actors. Their findings are shared through public reports, industry briefings, or direct coordination with national cyber defense teams. In many cases, these firms are on the front line of digital defense, even before the state responds. This ecosystem creates a hybrid intelligence environment where national agencies, private companies, ethical watchdogs, and data-driven platforms interact, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in conflict. The legal frameworks are often outdated, the ethical boundaries are evolving, and the technical capabilities are growing faster than regulation. Ultimately, the relationship between intelligence agencies and technology companies is built on tension, between secrecy and transparency, between access and encryption, between public duty and corporate interest. In this new terrain, the ability to navigate trust, law, and power will shape the future of both national security and digital liberty. The awareness of being observed alters behavior in subtle but measurable ways. In intelligence and surveillance studies, this phenomenon is often described as the observer effect, the principle that individuals modify their actions when they believe they are being watched. What began as a sociological concept now informs counterintelligence training, national surveillance strategy, and even public policy. The idea is not new. In the late 18th century, philosopher Jeremy Bentham proposed the panopticon, a prison design in which inmates could be watched by a single guard from a central tower, without knowing when or if they were being observed. The brilliance of the system was psychological. The uncertainty alone created compliance. Whether or not the eye was present, the fear of its gaze was enough to produce control. Modern surveillance, enhanced by technology, has taken this model and expanded it. In environments saturated with cameras, sensors, and digital monitoring, individuals are often aware, or at least suspect, that their actions might be seen, recorded, or reviewed. This perception influences choices, what people say, where they go, who they associate with, and even how they think. The pressure may be invisible, but the outcome is behavioral calibration. In cities with dense surveillance infrastructure, studies show reduced participation in protests, changes in shopping patterns, and even shifts in clothing choices, especially when facial recognition systems are known to be active. People may avoid controversial books in libraries, hesitate before clicking certain articles, or self-censor online speech. These are not direct orders from authority. They are adaptations to the possibility of scrutiny. The psychological mechanisms behind this are rooted in the human need for social evaluation. From early childhood, humans develop behavior based on cues from others, parents, teachers, peers. When surveillance mimics this external awareness, it activates similar mental systems, self-monitoring, shame regulation, and conformity impulses. The result is not always fear. Sometimes it's a heightened sense of public image, a performance of normalcy. This dynamic becomes more complex when surveillance is opaque. Not knowing who is watching, or whether anyone is, creates a kind of ambient tension. The unknown observer becomes a permanent mental fixture, shaping decisions long after the camera is out of sight. This state is not constant panic, but a dull vigilance. People may not feel they are under attack, but they no longer feel alone. In authoritarian regimes, this psychological conditioning is intentional. Citizens are trained to anticipate surveillance. Posters warn against dissent. Hotlines exist to report suspicious behavior. The result is internalized discipline. Even in private, people may speak carefully or avoid controversial topics. This is not simply repression, it is behavioral reshaping. In democratic societies, the line is more nuanced. Citizens often accept certain forms of observation, traffic cameras, airport scanners, digital cookies, in exchange for safety or convenience. But over time, as more activities become monitored, the cumulative effect begins to resemble Bentham's panopticon. Individuals adjust not only to laws, but to algorithms, audience expectations, and invisible filters. This phenomenon has implications beyond security. In education, students aware of monitoring software may alter how they interact with content. In workplaces, employees tracked by productivity tools may perform for the metric rather than the mission. Even in healthcare, patients may withhold information if they fear it could be recorded or misused. Intelligence agencies understand these effects. Psychological operations, PSYOP, sometimes leverage visibility, making certain surveillance tools known while concealing others. The goal is not always to catch, but to deter. If a threat actor believes they are compromised, they may abandon an operation, relocate, or fall into predictable behavior. Control, in this context, comes from suggestion, not force. However, constant surveillance has costs. It can erode trust, creativity, and authentic expression. When people feel monitored, they may retreat into narrow versions of themselves, safer, quieter, less risky. Innovation may stall, social bonds may weaken, suspicion becomes the default. The most effective intelligence systems understand this balance. They recognize that excessive visibility can be as damaging as too little. The art lies in knowing when to observe, when to remain unseen, and when to release control entirely. The psychology of being watched is not just about fear, it is about how identity reshapes under pressure. Despite technological sophistication, real-time data streams, and global surveillance capacity, intelligence agencies still fail, sometimes with catastrophic consequences. The digital age has not eliminated misjudgment, miscommunication, or blind spots. In fact, it has introduced new vulnerabilities, new kinds of overload, and new opportunities for deception. One of the most cited intelligence failures in recent history is the 2003 invasion of Iraq, justified in large part by the belief that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, WMDs. The US intelligence community, supported by allies, assessed with high confidence that Iraq maintained active WMD programs. These assessments were later found to be wrong. Key sources were unreliable. Dissenting voices within agencies were marginalized. Pressure to support a policy direction influenced analysis. This case revealed how intelligence can become entangled with political agendas. It also showed how digital information, intercepted communications, satellite images, data modeling can still be interpreted through biased frameworks. Technology expands capability, but it does not eliminate human judgment, and it is within judgment that failure often begins. Another significant breakdown came with the rise of the Islamic State, ISIS. Despite massive surveillance infrastructure in the Middle East, intelligence services were slow to detect the group's consolidation of territory, revenue streams, and ideological appeal. The group's use of social media for recruitment and propaganda caught many agencies off guard. Traditional models of radicalization and insurgency failed to account for how rapidly a movement could metastasize through online ecosystems. Digital platforms allowed ISIS to operate in a decentralized, viral manner. They crowdsourced jihad, attracted foreign fighters, and weaponized image-based terror. Intelligence systems built to monitor hierarchies struggled with amorphous networks. The speed of spread outpaced the bureaucratic response. Cyber intrusions have also revealed intelligence weaknesses. The 2015 breach of the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, OPM, attributed to Chinese state actors, compromised the personal records of over 21 million individuals, including fingerprints, background check data, and security clearance applications. This was not just a security incident, it was a long-term counterintelligence windfall for China. The breach exposed how vulnerable internal government systems can be, and how even agencies focused on secrecy can become soft targets. It also highlighted a broader problem. Agencies collect more data than they can properly defend. In an era of massive digital storage, protecting the perimeter is no longer enough. Breaches are not a matter of if, but when. Failures also come from internal leaks. Edward Snowden's release of classified NSA documents in 2013 revealed global surveillance programs and triggered diplomatic backlash. While the disclosures ignited important public debates, they also compromised intelligence methods and strained international cooperation. Similarly, the WikiLeaks publication of diplomatic cables and CIA hacking tools damaged trust and operational secrecy. These insider leaks show that even with extensive vetting, background checks, and polygraph testing, agencies remain vulnerable to internal dissent, ideological defection, or personal grievance. In the digital age, a single individual with a USB drive can inflict strategic damage once only possible with armies. Another form of failure is signal saturation, the problem of having too much data. Intelligence agencies now collect more information than ever before. Satellite imagery, intercepted communications, open source data, social media analysis, financial transactions. But volume does not guarantee insight. The challenge is filtering signal from noise. Key threats can be buried in irrelevant chatter. Analysts may miss anomalies because they resemble background patterns. AI helps, but it is not infallible. Some of the most dangerous threats are those that look ordinary until it's too late. A lone actor radicalized in silence, a cyber attack hidden in normal network traffic, or an insider slowly exfiltrating files over months. These failures don't happen due to lack of technology. They happen due to gaps in attention, structure, or imagination. Cultural dynamics within agencies can compound these failures. Analysts may fear speaking against prevailing interpretations. Hierarchies can suppress alternative views. Political pressure may steer conclusions toward what leaders want to hear, rather than what the data supports. In this way, failure becomes systemic, built into the architecture of how intelligence is produced. Learning from failure is a critical part of the intelligence cycle. After each breakdown, reviews are launched, structures reorganized, technologies upgraded. Yet the digital age moves quickly. New platforms emerge, adversaries adapt, the terrain changes faster than institutions can evolve. In the end, intelligence is not just about tools, it's about perception. And when perception narrows, fails to question itself, or trusts too easily in the power of machines, mistakes are inevitable. The digital age has changed the tools, but not the fundamental challenge of seeing clearly. Espionage has long operated in the grey zones of morality. By definition, it involves deception, manipulation, and the breaching of trust, acts considered unethical in most other domains. Yet within the framework of national interest, espionage is not only tolerated but institutionalized. In the digital era, where nearly all systems are interconnected, the ethical boundaries of espionage have become even more complex and more contested. Historically, spying was a physical act. A person crossed a border, posed as someone else, and extracted secrets through direct observation or human interaction. It was a slow, risky, and personal business. The ethics were often judged by proximity. Harm was limited, and accountability was sometimes possible. But now, espionage can be executed anonymously, remotely, and at scale. It targets entire databases rather than individuals, and it often leaves no visible trace. This evolution has sparked debates among policymakers, ethicists, and technologists. Is it ethical to surveil the entire population of another country without consent? What about spying on allies, justified by security, or a betrayal of diplomatic trust? Should cyber tools that exploit vulnerabilities be treated the same as weapons? And what ethical obligations exist when an operation risks collateral damage to civilians or systems? The concept of proportionality, long a cornerstone of ethical reasoning in warfare, is increasingly applied to intelligence. An action must be proportionate to the threat it seeks to counter. But when threats are vague, speculative, or based on predictive models, proportionality becomes subjective. A mass surveillance campaign may be framed as necessary to prevent a terrorist attack, but it can also erode civil liberties far beyond the intended scope. Another principle is necessity, the idea that espionage should only occur when no less intrusive method is available. Yet in practice, intelligence gathering often expands preemptively. Agencies justify data collection just in case a pattern emerges. When capabilities exist, there is temptation to use them, even when ethical justification is thin. Digital espionage complicates matters further because it often blurs the line between intelligence and sabotage. Inserting malware to exfiltrate files may seem harmless until it causes a system crash or exposes civilian infrastructure. The 2010 Stuxnet operation, widely attributed to US and Israeli intelligence, successfully disrupted Iranian nuclear centrifuges, but it also highlighted the potential for cyber tools to spread beyond their intended target. The operation raised difficult questions. Was it an act of war, a necessary defense, or an ethically ambiguous intrusion? The ethics of espionage also intersect with questions of consent. Citizens rarely know they are being surveilled. Corporations may collect data under one set of terms, only to have it accessed by intelligence agencies through backdoors or partnerships. Democratic oversight exists in some countries, but transparency is limited, and judicial review can be secretive or symbolic. Then there is the matter of dual-use technology, tools developed for civilian purposes that are repurposed for espionage. Satellite imagery, communication apps, biometric devices, and even AI models can be redirected toward intelligence goals. This duality complicates regulation. Should developers bear responsibility for how their tools are used, or does the ethical burden lie solely with the user? Whistleblowers have forced many of these ethical debates into the public sphere. Edward Snowden's disclosures, for example, revealed not only surveillance operations but internal discussions about their legality and morality. The tension between security and ethics was no longer abstract. It became a global controversy. Some hailed him as a defender of rights. Others saw him as a traitor. The ethical divide was laid bare. Intelligence agencies themselves are not blind to these dilemmas. Many have internal legal advisors, review boards, and ethical guidelines. But the pressure to act, to prevent, to uncover, to preempt, often overrides caution. In competitive geopolitical environments, restraint can feel like weakness. In a connected world, the impact of espionage is amplified. A single hack can compromise hospitals, power grids, financial systems. A surveillance leak can endanger informants and destroy diplomatic trust. The scale of potential harm makes ethics more important, but also more difficult to enforce. Ultimately, ethical espionage may seem like a contradiction, but it is not a naive idea. It is an evolving framework, one that seeks to impose limits, standards, and accountability on a practice rooted in secrecy. In a world where the lines between ally and adversary, war and peace, private and public continue to blur, the effort to bring ethics into espionage may be the most important form of intelligence we have. As technology accelerates, the landscape of global intelligence is being reshaped in ways that are both expansive and uncertain. From quantum computing to synthetic biology, from space-based surveillance to cognitive warfare, the future of espionage may not look like espionage at all, but rather a seamless extension of the systems that already define our lives. One of the most anticipated shifts involves quantum computing. While the technology is still in its early stages, its implications for intelligence are profound. Traditional encryption, the backbone of secure communication, relies on the difficulty of factoring large numbers. Quantum computers, with their ability to process multiple possibilities simultaneously, could break these codes in seconds. Intelligence agencies are already racing to develop post-quantum cryptography, preparing for a future in which current methods are obsolete. Simultaneously, quantum-based communication systems, such as quantum key distribution, offer the potential for unhackable channels, protected by the laws of physics rather than algorithms. Nations investing in these technologies seek both defensive and offensive advantage. Whoever masters quantum first may gain access to a treasure trove of previously impenetrable secrets, or create vaults that no adversary can breach. Another frontier lies in space-based intelligence. Satellites have long been used for imaging, signal interception, and missile detection, but the next generation will be faster, more agile, and capable of persistent monitoring. Constellations of small satellites, sometimes called swarms, could provide real-time data on global activities, troop movements, environmental changes, or cyber infrastructure activity. These satellites, combined with AI-driven image analysis, can identify anomalies across continents within minutes. However, this also introduces vulnerabilities. Satellites can be blinded, jammed, or physically attacked. Some nations have tested anti-satellite weapons, raising the stakes of orbital conflict. In the future, protecting intelligence assets in space will become as critical as securing them on Earth. Artificial intelligence will play a central role in every domain. It will automate threat detection, analyze communication patterns, and even generate disinformation to mislead opponents. AI can process massive volumes of unstructured data, video feeds, financial records, voice transcripts, and detect subtle patterns invisible to humans. Yet it can also be fooled, biased, or hijacked. Adversarial AI, the use of false inputs to mislead machine learning systems, will become a battlefield in itself. Cognitive warfare represents another emerging field. It focuses not on physical targets, but on human perception and decision-making. Through social media, algorithmic manipulation, and psychological profiling, state and non-state actors can influence how populations think, vote, and behave, often without realizing they are under attack. Intelligence operations may increasingly blur into influence campaigns, where winning the narrative is as critical as acquiring the fact. Meanwhile, advances in biotechnology raise new questions about identity and infiltration. Biometric systems, facial recognition, iris scans, DNA analysis are now used for access control and surveillance. But synthetic biology may one day allow operatives to alter biological markers, spoofing their way through security. Genetic targeting of specific populations, though still theoretical, has already entered strategic discussion. Intelligence ethics will be challenged by technologies that can alter the human body and mind. Cyber operations will only deepen in complexity. While current efforts focus on network breaches and data exfiltration, future systems may involve self-replicating code, automated cyber defenders, or entire virtual espionage ecosystems. The battlefield may not be a server room, but a synthetic simulation where intelligence agents train AI models to understand and counter each other in closed loops of escalating complexity. The geopolitical map is shifting too. Traditional power blocks are being challenged by digital alliances and economic interdependencies. Intelligence will no longer be a purely national function. Private firms, multinational platforms, and decentralized actors will gather, sell, and weaponize information on a scale once reserved for governments. In this future, the definition of espionage may need to be rewritten. It will not be about isolated acts of theft or secrecy, but about systemic advantage, who can see further, move faster, and understand more. It will require new disciplines, from data ethics to orbital security, and it will demand resilience, not only in systems, but in institutions, and in minds trained to think beyond today's threats. What lies ahead is not simply more intelligence, it is deeper integration between the digital, biological, and cognitive realms. The next battlefield may be invisible, algorithmic, and predictive, fought not for territory, but for truth, perception, and control. Espionage, in all its forms, is a paradox. It thrives in silence, yet shapes the loudest events. It operates in shadows, yet influences the course of nations. What began as an ancient practice of stealth and deception has grown into a global architecture of observation, manipulation, and influence, one that touches nearly every facet of modern life, often without our awareness. The tools have changed. Where once a spy carried a coded letter or memorized a message for a king, today's operatives navigate encrypted networks, launch cyber payloads, and analyze oceans of data in real time. The battlefield is now layered: physical, digital, psychological, and the adversaries may be as diffuse as a lone actor in a basement or as vast as a rival superpower's intelligence directorate. But beneath the surface of technologies and tactics lies something deeply human: the desire to know what others wish to keep hidden. This desire has driven innovation, conflict, cooperation, and betrayal for thousands of years. It is not always sinister. At times, intelligence has prevented war, dismantled terror networks, and saved lives. At others, it has overstepped, deceived its own people, or eroded the liberties it claimed to protect. Understanding espionage means accepting its contradictions. It is a world built on uncertainty, where truth is provisional and certainty is rare. It trains its agents to trust instinct and doubt everything else. It builds alliances on mutual advantage, knowing they may one day rupture. It asks questions most citizens never consider, not because they are unimportant, but because they are uncomfortable. In democratic societies, the intelligence community walks a narrow ridge. Protect without controlling, observe without violating, act without unraveling the very freedoms it exists to defend. Oversight mechanisms, legal frameworks, and public accountability are essential, but they must be matched by a culture of ethical awareness within the system itself. Intelligence work cannot be purely about efficiency. It must grapple with consequence. In authoritarian systems, intelligence often becomes an instrument of power maintenance. Here, the boundary between external and internal surveillance blurs. Citizens become subjects of control, and information is used not to understand the world, but to limit how the world can be seen. Propaganda and espionage become twins, one shaping belief, the other extracting advantage. And yet, no matter the system, the challenges of the future are converging. Technology does not recognize borders. Networks are porous. Biological threats, digital misinformation, climate-driven instability, these will require intelligence communities not only to collect data, but to interpret it wisely, act proportionately, and communicate transparently when possible. Espionage will remain hidden by necessity. It will always require some secrecy. But secrecy should not mean the absence of scrutiny. It is in this balance between what can be known and what must be protected that the future of intelligence will be forged. As we close this quiet journey through the architecture of the unseen, you may find your thoughts beginning to settle. If sleep has not yet come, that is completely fine. You have taken in patterns, histories, dilemmas, and futures, and even in stillness, your mind is processing the contours of the invisible world. Whether you are now drifting toward rest or simply reflecting in silence, the knowledge you carry is part of a deeper awareness. The hidden layers of our world, the ones stitched into cables, satellites, whispers, and codes, are no longer quite so hidden. You've walked their paths, if only for a little while. We from Sleepy Stories wish you a good night.